Chapter 56 Schemes of Brothers. On the day He Ming returned to Jing, the city was enveloped in a light rain. He was half lying inside the carriage, listening to the sound of rain outside. His face looked pale as he lifted up the curtain. He smiled indifferently as he saw the city gate looming closer. As the carriage drew up near the gate, he saw Dage and Erge sitting astride on their horses. Behind them, several officials stood nearby, waiting to welcome him back to Jing. He motioned for the carriage to stop and moved to step out. Sai Di is wounded, don't get up. He rode his horse forward, smiling as he prevented He Ming from coming down to bow. He dismounted, cupping one hand over his other fisted hand. Sai Di has suffered this time. Erge's words are an exaggeration. I failed in accomplishing the duty Fu Huang asked of me. I'm extremely embarrassed. Nonetheless, He Ming still made a bow in front of the carriage. His face had an expression of shame. To hear that Fu Huang is worried about it makes a Chen unfilial. You were fulfilling your duty. It was the bad intentions of others that ruined the mission. What does that have to do with you? He smiled. Fu Huang requested that Dage and I receive you before returning to the palace to report. Sai Di, you can rest your heart. Thanks Dage, Erge. He Ming made a bow towards He Chi before sitting back properly inside the carriage. The driver carefully put the curtain down and waited for Ning Wang and Duan Wang to move first. He got on his horse and moved towards the still-mounted He Chi. He looked at the carriage waiting behind him and said to He Chi, Dage, we should go. He Chi nodded and remarked as if he was both concerned and relieved, Sai Di looks much thinner. He must have had a hard time on the road. He nodded in agreement. He switched topics. After a few more days, the examinations start. When the spring examinations end, it would be Sai Di's big day. At that time, us brothers should have a good celebration. Naturally, we will celebrate. He Chi gave a bright laugh, and fell silent for the rest of the journey. When He Ming went to see Qingde Emperor, he was given some medicine before he left Tianqi Palace. Ngui Pin shed many tears when she saw He Ming appear in front of her. After listening to his Mu Fei narrate the events that recently occurred in Jing City, He Ming smiled as he assured her, Mu Fei no longer needs to worry. This is a good thing. At least Chen could close the Fu by using my recovery as an excuse. That way, I would not be drawn into their business. Ngui Pin heard this and her face suddenly changed. Minga, did you checking that no one else was in the room? He Ming lowered his voice. Those assassins seemed to have no intentions of harming Chen. They were only targeting Right Minister Wei. Chen's wounds may look dangerous but they didn't hit any critical parts. So Mu Fei doesn't have to worry too much. Ngui Pin wiped away her tears as she hatefully declared, He Chi and He Yuan are intolerable. They can fight for the throne all they want, but why do they have to involve my son? Those two, one is the oldest, the other is the most favored. Naturally, neither will care about other people. He Ming gave a bitter smile. Mu Fei shouldn't get angry over these matters. Ngui Pin barely managed to suppress her anger. She was not usually favored. After she had given birth, Shu Guifei had kept on bullying her. Thankfully, the Empress was fair and just. Otherwise, her days would have been even more difficult to endure. She sighed, it's Mu Fei that's useless. If Mu Fei was more favored, you wouldn't have been so neglected. She suddenly thought of Jing Guifei. Even though Jing Guifei wasn't as favored as Shu Guifei, she still had some standing in the emperor's heart. Her son, He Heng, was second in terms of favor, right behind He Yuan. She had never interacted with him but he seemed to be a very able person. She thought out loud, He Heng might not be an open and honest person, but Mu Fei thinks that this person isn't as cold-blooded and ruthless. If you interact with him more frequently, a good friendship could grow between brothers. He Ming understood what his Mu Fei meant. He paused for a beat before replying, Mu Fei doesn't have to worry, Chen will consider this matter thoroughly. If He Yuan or He Chi succeeded the throne, it was likely that his days would become even more difficult. If He Heng succeeded, even though he was a sanctimonious person, he wouldn't slight him since he was just an unthreatening younger brother. To show the love between brothers, He Heng would even treat him well. He Ming didn't want to fight, but he didn't want to be a sword that a person used and threw away. He could choose a wise master and plan for the rest of his life. He Hung's wife Chu She is extremely close to the Luo family. When you left Jing City, Chu She had sent people to deliver stuff to me. Jing Guifei was very attentive to me as well, and Gui Pin was a woman inclined to an ordinary life, but she wouldn't allow others to harm her child. No matter what ideas they have, at least their execution is much better looking than the other two. He Ming knew deep down that He Yuan and He Qi hadn't even properly looked at him. It was only Ji with whom he had camaraderie from all those times they playing together as children. It might have faded much over the years, but he still treated him much better than the other two, and he remembered the good turns he had been given. He sat down on the step carriage, provided specially to him by the order of Fu Huang, and left the palace. Soon after He Ming returned to his Fu, he received the gifts sent by the other families. Even Dage and Sanji had sent something over. Although their presents were only decorations that looked valuable but were practically useless, at least they had showed some concern. The presents that Ji's Fu had sent had been identified by his own Fu's doctor as restoratives that were good for the body. He Ming started to understand the concern Ji felt for him. Remembering how Fu Huang subtly hinted that he should ignore the officials who believed Sanji was behind the assassination attempt, the smile on He Ming's face became colder. Since Fu Huang wanted him to believe him, naturally he wouldn't make Fu Huang disappointed. As to whether or not anyone would trust his actions, that would depend on Fu Huang and Sanji. Paternal love. He Ming threw the sandalwood bead bracelet that Qingde Emperor had given him onto the floor. He watched as the beads bounced in every direction. He sneered as he spoke aloud, "It's such a joke." On the first day of the spring examinations, the carriages filled the areas outside the examination halls, all of them waiting to deliver the student scholars. Liang Rong and Chu Wangji sat inside a tea tower, watching as the flood of students lined up to enter the examination hall. The two felt their faces turn bitter. Both of them were students of the Eastern Mountain Academy. Because the academy was on holiday today, they came specially to look at the examination hall. They felt some pressure thinking about how they would also be entering this place soon. Chu Wangji was particularly tense, since he would be entering the exam hall in the fall. He looked at the stern examinees underneath and felt that he couldn't breathe. "Biao Xiong, there's not much to see here, let's leave." The exam had only been going on for 4 or 6 hours when a few white-haired examinees had been carried out. Chu Wangji's expression became uglier as he stood to leave. That Chu Fu, didn't it have a Wang Fei? Why did they send their little daughter off to be a Kia? Who knows? I just heard that little daughter was a child of the second wife. This second wife was only of a declining family. Duan Wang Fei was born from the original duchess. Do you know who she is? Who is she? Do you know the Marquis of Xiongqing, Tian Daren of the Supreme Court? That famous person, who hasn't heard of him? I heard that no matter how difficult the case could be, if it was delivered to the courts, it will be thoroughly investigated. Yes, that's the one. Duan Wang Fei's birth mother was the Marquis of Xiongqing's full-blooded Jejie. How can you say that their education and birth were the same? The fact that one became a Wang Fei and the other becoming a concubine, isn't that normal? Chu Wangji's face became ghastly as he overheard the conversation. He wanted to rush down and argue with the people downstairs, but Liang Rong stopped him. "Wangji, this is the entrance to the examination hall. It would not be good for you if you start something. But to let them keep discussing my family like this." Chu Wangji's rage didn't dissipate, but he didn't insist on rushing down. If the matter became public, it might affect him later on if he went into politics. Liang Rong looked at the surroundings before lowering his voice to advise, "Right now, they are just having a good time. You have to know, the most favored right now is His Highness Rui Wang. Biaomai has gone into Rui Wang Fu to be a Ce Fei. In the future, he raised a thumb at Chu Wangji, the meaning evident. Chu Wangji gritted his teeth and kept a lid on his anger. The two came down the tea tower. After traveling for a while on their horses, they saw a grandiose procession heading towards them. The leading guards were all stocky and tough-looking, their eyes alert. From a glance, it could be seen that these were the type of guards which could never be owned by normal families. The carriage behind was pulled by 8 stallions. Bells attached to the sandalwood carriage rang merrily as it moved forward. The two could only yield the right-of-way. When the carriage came closer, they saw that the carriage was imprinted with the symbol of Duan Wang Fu. Chu Wangji's face darkened, but he could only helplessly lower his head to show his respect to the Wang Fu. After Duan Wang Fu's carriage traveled further ahead, the two continued to proceed. Liang Rong asked with some confusion, "That's the direction heading out of the city. Duan Wang Fu is taking this many carriages, I wonder where they are going? Was the family of Duan Wang really heading out to relax at this important time? Who knows what these Wang Yi want to do?" Chu Wangji's tone wasn't friendly. He turned to look in the direction the Duan Wang Fu carriages took. He paused before noting, "I heard that Duan Wang Yi had a hot spring estate in the suburbs. The flowers bloom early on that mountain. They must be going sightseeing." Chu Wangji was born to a duke and knew more than Liang Rong. He was pretty clear and knowledgeable about the more important properties the Wang Yi in Jing owned in the suburbs of the city. Going out to play? Right now, the wounded Right Minister Wei Yi and Cheng Wang had both returned to Jing after the attempted assassination. Ning Wang and Rui Wang were engaged in a white-hot battle, and Duan Wang had the leisure to go on holiday. Liang Rong felt his head wasn't able to process it at all. At this time, wasn't he supposed to take advantage? What did avoiding it mean? The play was going to start, but Duan Wang had done such an action. How would the Daran engaged in conflict at Jing endure? Inside the carriage, Chu Qingju, her hair in a simple hairstyle, leaned on the soft cushions as she asked, "Wang Yi is really leaving Jing like this?" He Heng smiled calmly at her. "Didn't Qingju want to soak in the hot springs? The weather is just perfect." Chu Qingju giggled, turning to burrow into his embrace. "Wang Yi treats me so well." Her words sounded so fake to He Heng's ears. He smiled helplessly as he explained, "At this time, Jing City would certainly fall into a storm because of Psi Di and the rankings from the spring examinations. Ben Wang isn't interested in these things. It's better to stay away and find some peace." Chu Qingju looked at his face, and strangely, on his face, the words two-faced were written there. Did he really believe she never heard the story of the mantis stalking the locust, unaware of the aureole behind it? Chapter 57. Husband and wife on a trip together. The hot springs in the Jing suburbs were located not too far from the city. Chu Qingju saw that the nameplate of Manor's front gate had Fu Lang Manor written on it. Releasing the curtains, she commented to He Heng sitting beside her, "This name is popular and literary. The meaning is very good. Ian, this property was bequeathed by Fu Huang, and Mu Fei named it." He Heng tilted his head to smile. "After entering this gate, we would be traveling for quite a while before reaching our residence. There are many crops planted here. Some off-season fruits and vegetables can only be grown near the springs. Much of our Fu's fruits come from this manor." The intelligence of the ancients were, as expected, endless. They didn't have any plastic tarps or greenhouses to plant vegetables. Instead, they used the aid of nature to grow the food that shouldn't be in season. And their produce were a lot more natural compared to those that grew in the greenhouses. "There's a patch of peach and pear blossoms blooming right now on the mountain. After we rest today, I'll accompany you there tomorrow." He Heng saw her face was full of admiration and his smile became more visible. "Baiyun Mountain is very close by. If we have the time, we should go see the Five Estates Monastery at the peak." Baiyun Mountain Five Estates Monastery? Chu Qingju felt the name sounded familiar but couldn't recall where she had heard it. It probably wasn't anything important. Otherwise, she would have remembered it. She didn't think about it any further and raised the curtain occasionally to look at the scenery. The road had been constructed well. It was completely paved with black stone. Large trees were planted beside the road. To her left, some sections of the field were planted with wheat and all kinds of vegetables behind the trees. To her right were several fruit trees. The surroundings didn't look very symmetrical, but Chu Qingju didn't have an obsessive-compulsive disorder, so she thought it looked rather interesting. After traveling for a while, the carriage stopped. Chu Qingju heard a voice speaking just outside the carriage. "This humble person Zhong Hong greets Wang Yi, Wang Fei." Chu Qingju stilled for a beat before she understood. This Zhong Hong was most likely the chief steward of this manor. No wonder he had come out to welcome them in the middle of the road. She looked at He Hung and saw the other seemed to think it was normal behavior. Steward Zhong doesn't have to be so courteous. Has everything in the manor been prepared? Qian Changshin smiled insincerely at Zhong Hong as he could see the other's desire to curry favor. Today marks the first time Wang Fei has come to this estate. If you serve them well, naturally there will be rewards. If a mistake occurs, you yourself will receive the punishment. Don't worry, Chief Steward Qian. Us humble people will serve well, and wouldn't be remiss in any way. Zhong Hong didn't expect Wang Yi or Wang Fei to pay any attention to him. He smiled as he retreated to join the other stewards. Hot water and food have already been prepared on the mountain. It cannot compare to the Fu, but it wins at having more of a wild taste. Wang Yi and Wang Fei can taste something new. Smart. Coming out here at this time, it's good to eat something fresh. Chen Changshin spoke quietly and gave Zhong Hong an appreciative glance before he waved his hand for the procession to move ahead. As they watched the train of carriages depart, the steward behind Zhong Hong asked, Chief Steward Zhong, what should we do now? Do now. Hurry and keep up. If any of the people down there do something wrong, we will all be affected. Zhong Hong's fawning manner instantly disappeared and he glared at the speaker. He started chasing after the carriages. The other stewards stared at each other. Wang Yi didn't usually come to the manor. They didn't know the preferences of Wang Yi and Wang Fei. But seeing how tense the chief steward was, they also started running. After the carriage had stopped for the second time, Chu Qingju finally saw the gate of the main building on the property. The building wasn't as grand as the Wang Fu, but it had its own sense of style. It was very exquisite, especially the three-level tower located behind it. Chu Qingju couldn't help but look at it more closely. If you like the Jade Cloud Tower, we could live in there for the next few days. He Hung smiled as he suggested, beside Jade Cloud Tower is the Hot Springs Pavilion. A white jade pool has been constructed there. It's very easy to soak in there. Chu Qingju nodded, great. A better view of the scenery can be seen from the top of the tower. After hearing that Wang Fei and Wang Yi wished to live in Jade Cloud Tower, the servants moved everything over. They lit the fragrances, the copper beast stoves and other things in order to heat up the building so that their owners would be warm and happy. Chu Qingju let He Hung accompany her as she walked around the main building of the estate. She found that the carvings and the halls of this estate were finely crafted and held hints of the construction style of Jiangnan. She even saw a hot stream winding its way through the property. It must have been constructed using the water from the hot springs. Chu Qingju felt that the hot springs that called themselves emperor-level treatment in her previous life were just weaklings compared to what was before her eyes. Look at this hot spring estate that a Wang Yi had. If it was like this, how much grander would the emperor's one be? This property is slightly small but it is very exquisite. It's fine to come out here occasionally. He Hung didn't have much interest in the flora and fauna of the estate. He held Chu Qingju's hand and walked slowly towards Jade Cloud Tower. Over the years, I've only come here once or twice and I haven't had the chance to take a good look around the place. Then Wang Yi has to stay here with me and play for a few days. Even though Chu Qingju knew he had no intention of interfering with court matters, she still added, it's just that this is very far for Wang Yi to go to court. He Hung smiled, that's fine. I don't have many matters to deal with nowadays. After I attend court, I'll come back here to keep you company. As he thought of the prearranged events in Jing City, the smile on his face dimmed. I'll also use the carriage. Even if I have to wake up earlier than usual, I could nap inside whilst traveling. Chu Qingju laughed at him for being lazy and He Hung pinched her cheek in retaliation. The two held hands as they played the entire way. The servants passing by all lowered their heads, not daring to look at their faces directly. After the noon meal, the two took a nap before rising and prepared to take a walk outside. Chu Qingju sat in front of the mirror and watched Yuzon familiarly style her hair. She ordered, these days, you don't need to take as much care with the hair ornaments. Over here, there's no need to show my status. Yuzon nodded in response. She picked up the hairpins for Chu Qingju and chose a pale yellow short dress for her to wear. Chu Qingju tilted her head as she looked at herself in the mirror. There was a hint of the style of the women of Jiangnan. She smiled and complimented, Yuzon's hands are so clever. As she spoke, she rewarded each of the 4 Yahuan who'd accompanied her when she married with a pearl-encrusted hairpin. He Heng also finished dressing at the same time. Seeing Chu Qingju's light and clean appearance, he commented, "Qingju is beautiful in whatever you wear, as expected." As expected. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow. Wang Yi is always unusually handsome in anything he wears. He Heng was wearing a moon-colored long robe. He did seem to have some of the looks needed to attract women. She came forward and tickled his palm. "I can't look away." Wasn't he supposed to say that to her? He Heng smiled helplessly. He took her hand and said, "Let's go. The rain has stopped. We can take a look at the back of the mountain." The entire mountain they were situated on belonged to He Heng. Chu Qingju had the feeling that she was investigating her husband's assets. She and He Heng got on the step carriage together. They looked at the grasses and trees on both sides. After they reached the back of the mountain, she pointed at the small waterfall that had formed when the water on the mountain first flowed down and exclaimed, "This is like a drawing." A green mountain, a thin mist, and the pink peach blossoms blooming in the trees. Chu Qingju was moved. No wonder the main male lead in the novels liked to use the scenery to chase after their beauty. Because looking at beautiful scenery made people happy. Even though Chu Qingju had been part of the entertainment circle for a long time, she was still dazed by the scenery before her. But Chu Qingju's happy mood didn't stay for long because an incident occurred. Wang Yi. This voice was so deeply tragic that a person's heart would break upon hearing it. She looked behind her and saw Yunqing wearing a slightly faded cotton dress and standing on a rock slightly behind them. Chu Qingju was even able to see the tears of excitement that came down her face. Was this estate that Yunqing was sent to? He Heng didn't think anyone would have the nerve to interrupt their admiration of the scenery. He frowned as he looked over at Yunqing, blind to the tears on her face. He asked harshly, "Who let her in? Weren't you ordered to guard this area and not let anyone in?" A steward hurriedly ran over and knelt with a bang in front of them. "This humble person greets Wang Yi, Wang Fei. Please forgive us. She is this humble person's wife. Just now, she came here to deliver food to this humble person, and accidentally came in. It was this humble person's slip. Please, forgive this humble person's wife." He started kowtowing. Chu Qingju lowered her head to look at the man dressed in the blue clothing of a steward. He was short and slightly plump, beads of sweat running down his forehead as though he was very worried for Yunqing. Yunqing didn't attend to the man pleading mercy for her. She came forward a few steps to kneel in front of them, wailing tragically, "Wang Yi, NU has finally seen you." Chu Qingju saw that He Heng's expression was ugly, but he didn't seem to want to speak to the woman. She could only scold, "Outrageous, how can you speak so in front of Wang Yi?" Yunqing's face paled. She stared with fear at Chu Qingju. This was the woman who'd sent her out of the Fu and married her to a short and fat man. Now, she wasn't a pure woman. How could Wang Yi want her now? NU forgot on account of seeing Wang Yi. "Please forgive me, Wang Fei." Yunqing gave another bow. She didn't speak any further but continued sobbing, her thin shoulders slightly trembling and appearing very pitiful. The short and fat man who had been begging for mercy on her behalf stopped in a daze after hearing her words. He hadn't thought that the woman he was protecting with all his heart would say such unrestrained words. His face started to change over and over, feeling extremely embarrassed. He Heng frowned in irritation, looking visibly sick of the whole matter. His left index finger impatiently tapped the handrail. "As a woman who is now married, you should pay more attention to how you speak." Chu Qingju saw that the steward Wang Dong was still in a daze and added, "Steward Wang, take your wife and leave." She didn't understand what Yunqing was thinking. A man had sent her away. Naturally that meant he no longer had any interest in her. Why do something like this and make her future days harder? Wang Dong woodenly made a kowtow and pulled Yunqing along as he started to walk, not caring as Yunqing tripped and stumbled behind him. After he pulled the other to a place where he couldn't see Wang Yi and Wang Fei, Wang Dong silently released Yunqing's hand. Yunqing said resentfully to Wang Dong, "Move, I don't need you controlling me." When she had finished, she felt a pain burning on her face. Wang Dong had hit her. Yun Qing stared wide-eyed in disbelief. This weak and cowardly man dared to hit her. Shameless. As he spoke, the slightly plump face of Wang Dong didn't have any expression. None of the gentleness and emotion that had appeared in the past was visible now. Yun Qing stilled. She saw Wang Dong turn and walk away, refusing to look at her again. Her mind fell into a sea of emptiness. He Heng felt that his ears were finally clean. A beat later, he revealed a satisfied smile as he pointed in the other direction and informed, "There's a very big mouth over there, the pool is even bigger than the one in the pavilion. But the surroundings are not good, so only an open hot spring was constructed. When the weather warms, we could play there like ducks." Chu Qingju glanced in the direction that Yun Qing left in. She smiled, nodded her head and announced, "Then, I'll have to take a look." To want something that one could never receive, that person's life was fated to be a tragedy. Chapter 58 Assassination. It was not a secret that Cheng Wang had been wounded in the arm by the assassins. Even though the wound had healed, but the Tai said there may be remaining symptoms. When it was winter, there would be unbearable pain. So the imperial doctors gave a suggestion that Cheng Wang soak in the hot springs whenever he was free. This would be of benefit to his bones. But He Ming didn't have many properties in the first place, and he didn't have any hot springs. Just at that time, he coincidentally heard that Ge had gone to his estate to soak in the hot springs. He instantly clapped his hands, and personally sent an invitation expressing that he wanted to go to the hot springs at Fulang Manor. This move, in the eyes of others, might have been a coincidence, but in the eyes of those using their heads, it held a different meaning. They understood that His Highness Cheng Wang had returned for a few days to Jing, but why didn't anyone already suggest the hot springs earlier, but only at this sensitive time? Suspicions could only remain suspicions. Cheng Wang wasn't participating in the battle for the throne, he wasn't usually a brave person. No one at the court cared about him, putting their focus on the rankings from the spring examinations and the criminal behind the assassination incident. As to the victim that had been nearly assassinated, because the emperor didn't place any importance, he was simultaneously overlooked. He Heng had received He Ming's missive at the palace gate. The characters that He Ming wrote on the paper were like him, proper, straightforward and regular. It didn't have any style, but no one would dislike it. He Heng gave the missive to Ming He, "Go personally to Cheng Wang Fu, say that Ben Wang, as his elder brother, will always welcome his DD." Ming He nodded, turning and getting on a horse. He sped up as he made his way to Cheng Wang Fu. He Heng looked in the direction that Ming He left in. He raised his head to look at the sky. Frowning, he said, "This sky doesn't look very pleasant, the mist has come in so early. We should head back to the manor early." Qian Chang Xin came forward to put down the curtain of the carriage that He Heng was sitting in. Turning his head, he sent a look at the guard driving and indicated for him to leave quickly. When the carriage trotted its way out of the city gates, the mist had already become thicker. Even the sky was dark and heavy. Occasionally, bursts of cold wind blew by. Qian Chang Xin rubbed his arms and inhaled a breath. This cold snap was too strong. Today was much colder than the previous days. He looked carefully at the road ahead, suddenly seeing the grass on the side of the road moving. He indicated for the carriage to stop. Before the carriage had completely stopped, he flipped off to stand in front of the entrance the carriage, shrieking, "Guards!" This high-piercing shout rang out in the mist and caused the guards to shudder. When they managed to react, they saw almost 20 men wielding large blades leaping out of the grass, heading straight and chopping at Wang Yi's carriage. Arrows flew out of the woods randomly. It was lucky that there was a layer of iron on inside the carriage. Qian Chang Xin had closed the door to the carriage in time, so those arrows all dropped outside the carriage, but one arrow, taking advantage of that moment Qian Chang Xin was shutting the door, quickly pierced inside. "Come protect Wang Yi." Qian Chang Xin unsheathed the large blade that the driver had on his back, guarding against the assassins that were heading to the side of the carriage. The guards knew very clearly if something did happen to Wang Yi, they didn't need to live. They could only grit their teeth and fight. If they didn't die, a good life awaited them. If they died, it was showing their loyalty to the very end. Because no one had expected that someone would dare to assassinate a Wang Yi on the main road, He Heng hadn't taken many guards with him. After a period of time, the situation turned for the worst. Commander Sun felt that he had definitely offended the gods this year. He had just taken the Imperial Guards for a casual patrol in the Jing suburbs, and he could encounter an assassination attempt. The target also had to be His Highness Duan Wang. When he saw the scene, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He hurriedly sent his subordinates to help. The assassins hadn't expected that the Imperial Guards who preferred to patrol inside the city would appear here, quickly retreating. The only thing they left were a few corpses that had been killed by the guards. Wei Chen was late in protecting. "Has Your Highness Duan Wang been wounded?" Commander Sun saw the assassins retreat and waved his hand to let the subordinates give chase, he himself getting off the horse and kneeling on one knee in front of He Hung's carriage. Qian Xin also got off the carriage, kneeling in front as well. "It was us that was useless," and startled Wang Yi. The door to the carriage slowly was pulled open. He Hung walked out under the worried and fearful looks of everyone present. Qian Xin looked at the sleeve of his right hand, which had been dyed crimson with blood. He was so afraid his legs were soft. "Wang Yi, you were wounded." When Commander Sun heard the words, the sweat on his forehead started to flow down. He raised his head to take a look and saw that the sleeve of Duan Wang's left hand was completely drenched in red, his right hand holding an arrow speckled with blood. Just a graze, it didn't reach the bones. Finishing, he gave the arrow to Qian Xin. This arrow was left behind by the assassins that wounded Ben Wang. Hopefully this will be helpful to Commander Sunday. Commander Sun received the arrow from Qian Xin. He found that it was a very normal arrow, the arrowhead made from normal iron, and there were no special attributes about the feathers at the end of the arrow. "Wang Yi, please do not worry. Wei Chen will definitely investigate this matter thoroughly." Finishing, Commander Sun let his subordinates take away the corpses on the ground. He picked up the remains of the blades and the scattered arrows, hoping to find a clue from those pieces. By this time, Ming He had caught up from the city, and found that Wang Yi had nearly been assassinated and was wounded. He could only turn his head around to the Imperial Hospital to find a Tai Yi. After Commander Sun left, He Hung allowed the servants to give a makeshift treatment to his wound. He announced to the people present, "Today, everyone here will be rewarded according to their deeds. The fact that Ben Wang could leave here safely is all due to your efforts." The guards bowed in thanks, their hearts beating faster. Wang Yi hadn't punished them because of being wounded from the assassination but had rewarded them. It didn't waste their efforts in fighting with their lives. After He Hung returned to sit inside the carriage, he covered his wound, his face not showing any of the fear and anger after being attacked by an assassin. Climbing up from the hot spring, Chu Qingju put on new clothing and felt her back strangely become cold. She walked back into the inner room, asking Mu Jin and the others who had been standing guard outside, "Has Wang Yi returned to the manor?" "Wang Fei, there hasn't been anyone who has reported so." Mu Jin saw the hair of Wang Fei was loose, the strand still dripping water, and took a piece of cotton to dry Chu Qingju's hair for her. After just a few wipes, she saw Huang Yang rushing in. Seeing that she was drying her hair, he hesitated before reporting, "Wang Fei, Nukai has heard that Wang Yi was attacked. He's coming back to the estate now." "Attacked?" Chu Qingju's voice rose. She stood, saying, "Follow me to take a look." Finishing, she rushed out the door. Mu Jin paused and then threw the cloth to one side. She grabbed a sandalwood hair comb before following. Wang Fei's hair was still dripping. It wouldn't be good for the servants to see her hair down and loose. Chu Qingju was very clear that a person like He Hung wouldn't be easily wounded by others. But the road from the city gate to the manor was a major road. What person had the bravery and drive to stage an assassination attempt at that kind of place? "Wang Yi, Wang Fei is here." Just as Qian Xin's voice sounded, He Hung saw Chu Qingju walk in from the outside. He saw that she was wearing a simple wide-sleeved blue-girdled dress, her hair carelessly brushed behind her back. It looked like it wasn't even dry. "Wang Yi, how are you?" Chu Qingju walked in front of He Hung. He was sitting in front of the desk. The light-colored robe that he wore as he had left in the morning was changed for a blue soft silk robe, white muslin wrapped around his left arm. "I'm fine, sit here." He patted the spot beside him, motioning for Chu Qingju to side beside him. As Chu Qingju sat down, Her gaze still stayed at his wound, but the white muslin covered the wound. What's going on? Why did the assassins come? Who has such daring? Finishing, she furrowed her eyebrows. How's the wound? Has the Tai been summoned? It didn't reach the bone, just a graze from the arrowhead. He Hung smiled. The Tai will arrive soon. Just as he said so, Ming He brought the Tai in. Seeing Wang Fei's hair flowing free, he paused before reacting with a bow, announcing, Wang Fei, the head of the Imperial Hospital has arrived. Wei Yichen greets Wang Fei. The head of the Imperial Hospital was over half a century old but still energetic. He saw that Wang Yi and Wang Fei were sitting extremely close and instantly understood. The outside always spoke of how good the relationship was between the Du and Wang couple. He had thought it was just a rumor, but today he saw that it did seem true. Please stand. Look at Ben Wang's wound and stop Wang Fei from fretting so much. He Hung extended his left arm. He gave a faint smile and teased, don't purposefully make it too serious. Yes, the dean carefully untied the white muslin wrapped around the wound. He saw the wound on Du and Wang's wrist was very long. It did seem like a graze from an arrow. The appearance was very frightening, but it hadn't made any significant damage. Chu Qingju inhaled sharply. She watched as the Tai skillfully treat the bloodstains on the wound before putting a poultice on and wrapping the injury. Wang Yi, your wound might not have reached the bone, but the wound is very large. It will take a few days of recovery and cannot touch the water in these next days. Remembering that Wang Yi had come to this manor specially to soak in the hot springs, the dean felt sympathy for the injured person. Why was Du and Wang get attacked, or who directed it, it wasn't important to him. The most important was that he wouldn't be dragged in. After the dean finished everything, he stood to bid farewell. Ming He personally sent him off and presented a large amount of fees. Dean Darren, you say, with Wang Yi's wound, should he rest peacefully for a few days? Peacefully? The dean ruminated for a second before smiling and assuring, naturally he should rest peacefully and recover. Wang Yi might be busy usually, but he would have to make himself idle in the next little while. This one understands. Thanks for your trouble, Dean Darren. Da Ren, this way. Ming He gave a bow and smiled as he made a motion in the direction of exit. Ming Gongong doesn't have to be so courteous. No need to send me off, farewell. The dean returned half a bow, smiling before he sat on the mule cart to leave the manor. Ming He looked at the mule cart as it left, giving a bark of laughter before turning to return to Yu Yun Lu. How did I come out with my hair down? Chu Qingju suddenly stood from her seat. She held her hair, hurriedly declaring, Wang Yi, I'm going back to the inner rooms. Turning, she muttered, so embarrassing. He Hung thought about her state just now and couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the inner room, Chu Qingju slightly frowned. This matter didn't seem right somewhere. But the finer details determined success and failure. She had been so worried she came out with wet hair to see He Hung. Such concern, did it count as coming from the heart? Thinking about the fierce wound, Chu Qingju furrowed her brows. She then thought, these assassins were very stupid not to poison the arrows. They really wasted a very good opportunity. Chapter 59. The Grace of the Emperor. Putting up her hair, Chu Qingju came out again to see He Hung was sitting on a recliner reading a book. She unhesitatingly sat down next to him. Wang Yi, an assassination attempt is a serious matter. Shouldn't we tell Mu Fei and let her know you are not seriously wounded to stop her from worrying? He Hung nodded. You are the most considerate. Finishing, he called for Qian Changshin and gave out his waist plate for him to enter the palace to see Jing Guifei. He was to clearly tell the process, and the important point was that his wound wasn't serious. Qian Changshin hurriedly left the manor. Even though it was late now, even if the palace was already locked, he had to think of a way to pass the message into the palace. The guards at the city gate recognized Qian Changshin as Duan Wang's personal Taijian. They didn't ask any questions before allowing him to pass. By this time, the news that Duan Wang had been attacked by assassins had spread through Jing City. They saw the rush that Qian Changshin was in. Who would dare to block him? Entering the palace gate, Qian Changshin scurried as he traveled to Zhongjing Palace. Before he could state his intentions, he was ushered in by the servants of Zhongjing Palace. When he entered the room, he didn't dare to see the expression on Jing Guifei's face, submissively kneeling on the ground, announcing, "Guifei Nyang Nyang, His Highness has sent Nukai to come give a morning greeting to Nyang Nyang. How is Wang Yi's condition?" Jing Guifei's voice was heavier than usual, but she still didn't lose her composure. Ding Memar, the person standing by her side, was the only one that found that the hand Nyang Nyang had was tightly grasping on the arm of the chair, the fingers almost white. It was clear how worried Nyang Nyang was. The dean of the Imperial Hospital has already seen to it. His Highness isn't seriously injured, it just grazed the flesh. Wang Yi and Wang Fei were afraid you would become worried listening to the inaccurate rumors and sent Nukai to personally tell. Finishing, he obediently recited the string of events, not emphasizing or distorting any part. After Jing Guifei heard the course of events, she was much calmer. She thought for a while with half-lidded eyes before she raised her head to inform Qian Changxin, "You go and tell His Highness to recover for the next few days in the manor. Sent more people to the manor to protect your Wang Yi and Wang Fei." Finishing, she stood and rubbed her cheeks. She raised her head slightly as she announced, "Ben Gong is going to Tianqi Palace to beg to see the Emperor." It wasn't only Shu Guifei that could use the trick of injuring oneself to gain another's sympathy. She, Wei Chanyi, also could use it, and she would use it better, and without a trace. Reaching up to take out a few hairpins from her hair to let the finely crafted hairstyle become loose, Jing Guifei took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes. Suddenly, her foot tripped and she stumbled as she walked towards the outer room, wailing tragically, "Your Majesty, our child." As she ran, a few locks of hair fell loose, framing her face and making her look even more sorrowful. Ding Mama quickly wiped the corners of her eyes with force, choking as she followed, "Nyang Nyang, Nyang Nyang, be careful of where you step." As the words landed, the person had already disappeared from the room. Qian Changshin's face was full of reverence as he looked at the empty door. A beat later, he climbed up from the ground. When he walked out of the inner room, he saw the palace maids and Taijian, each covering their faces, sobbing or looking fretful. In this instant, he felt he had a very large room for improvement. In the end, no one knew that Jing Guifei said when she went to Tianqi Palace. But that night, Qingde Emperor sent out many imperial decrees. The junior Minister of Justice, the Minister of Justice, the Commander of the Imperial Guards all received a decree. The meaning was they could sacrifice everything in order to find the mastermind. It showed just how furious the Emperor was about the matter. Other than that, Qingde Emperor bestowed many different kinds of rare herbs, gold, silver, jewelry and outstanding martial arts guards, Tai skilled in treating all kinds of injuries. This night, the gate of Jing City seemed to open and close and open as an endless stream of gifts were delivered from the palace by horse courier to the Fulang Manor where Duan Wang was recovering. A low-ranked soldier that guarded the gate looked at the fast horses as they disappeared into the night. He said with some awe, "The Emperor treats His Highness Duan Wang so well." A senior soldier snorted at the side, "Other than Rui Wang, Duan Wang is the most favored by the Emperor. Did you see the Emperor this worried when Cheng Wang was attacked last time?" If they didn't already know, they would have thought that Duan Wang and Cheng Wang's injuries were reversed. It could be seen that a person just didn't have to choose a father when he reincarnated, but also the mother. Otherwise, why was it that they were all imperial sons, but the care was so drastically different? "Are you suicidal? Are you allowed to discuss the matters of the Wang Yi?" Commander Sun passed by on his horse. Hearing the conversation, he said with a heavy face, "Shut the gate." The expression of the two changed with fright. Along with the others, they obediently closed the city gate. The result was that not long after, they saw a few more people speeding on horses, a gold token held up in one hand. They instantly understood, oh, this was also from the palace heading to Fu Lang Manor. On the backs of the horses were several boxes wrapped in bright yellow cloth. The gatesmen didn't know what was inside, but their expression was wooden. "How many horses have already passed by?" Chu Qingju disguised a yawn and looked at the piles of gifts in front of her. She turned to look at the lazily sitting He Heng. Smiling as she commented, "The Emperor has such care for Wang Yi, how many rounds of gifts have already come?" With an expression like a smile yet not a smile, He Heng glanced at Chu Qingju before flipping a page of his book. "It will be better tomorrow." By that time, we would have had a good sleep. Regardless, I'm not going to court any time soon. I can accompany you now. This disdainful tone might be a bit too hurtful. Chu Qingju blinked her eyes. Doesn't Wang Yi have to rest to recover? Ben Wang was frightened and needs to see the mountains and water to comfort the soul. He Heng smiled as he closed the book. He looked at Chu Qingju as he commanded, Qingju has to keep me company. Otherwise, I would be frightened if I was alone. Chu Qingju raised the corner of her mouth to make her smile brighter. Don't be afraid, Wang Yi, I will keep you in good company. He Heng smiled broadly. Qingju is so kind. Standing in the corner, Ming He and the others buried their heads. The tactics of Wang Yi and Wang Fei as they teased and flirted were better and better. As the servants, they had to pretend to not hear, and control their expressions. It was very hard. Imperial decree has arrived. The two exchanged a look and calmly patted at the non-existent dust on their bodies before they knelt in the center of the room. After the Tai recited the decree and the gifts, Chu Qingju, as the uninjured party, took over the imperial decree and bowed to give thanks. She watched as the Taijian present the items and then as the Taijian quickly left. Randomly opening a box, Chu Qingju's eyes narrowed. 100-year-old blood ginseng, very rare stuff. She tilted her head to look at He Heng and found that the other didn't even look at the items in the box. Closing the box, Chu Qingju asked, why don't Wang Yi sleep first? It's all right if I stand guard. Just a minor injury, don't worry like this. He Heng smiled helplessly, knowing that the other was worried about his wound. He assured, it's past 11 now, there shouldn't be any more. Finishing, he used the right hand which wasn't injured to pull the person to sit beside him. Chu Qingju followed and Saturday. She sighed, saying, if they find the mastermind, they must punish him strictly. Don't worry. In the end, someone will be punished. He Heng clasped her hand as he said, after a few days, Cheng Wang might be coming to the manor. You need to get someone to prepare a residence. Sai Shu. Chu Qingju stilled before smiling as she mused, that's true, soaking in the hot springs would be good for Sai Shu's body. Ian, He Heng kissed her cheek, my Qingju is so smart. Chu Qingju raised an eyebrow, is Wang Yi comforting a little child? He Heng laughed lightly. The result was he was bitten firmly on the shoulder by Chu Qingju, which ended up with him laughing even more joyously. Chu Qingju pushed her head onto the other's chest, gave a yawn, rubbed a few times before she closed her eyes. Seeing the person in his embrace sleeping like this, He Heng smiled helplessly. Just before, she had said for him to go sleep first. How did it turn out to be her falling asleep first? Thinking of how the person he was hugging had looked as she ran in with her flowing hair, He Heng's heart felt ticklish. Even though she had not been wearing makeup, her hair a tangle, but in his eyes, she was the most beautiful at that instant. Gently touching a finger to the slightly moist lips, He Heng's lips curled. Even his eyes were full of mirth. On the second morning, the court had turned into a mess due to the fact Duan Wang had been attacked. The incident with the envoys hadn't been cleared yet, and now Duan Wang was also attacked by assassins. It was lucky that the Imperial Guards had patrolled in that area. If Commander Sun hadn't went to that location, who knew how bad the situation would have been? Qingde Emperor was in a rage, ordering the Imperial Guards, Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to cooperate at the highest level and find the criminal. He even said at court, if they couldn't make clear of the matter of Duan Wang being attacked, then the three top officials of these three places would not stay there. The only Imperial son left at court, He Qi, thought suspiciously, did Laro-san really do this? Commander Sun felt fortunate at this time. Thankfully he had been hearing about robbery occurring at a certain place outside the city these past days. It was why he decided to patrol there yesterday. Who knew he would coincidentally save Duan Wang? This was a boon from the gods. But who was that person that reported to him that robberies were occurring at a spot outside the city? He remembered that low-ranked soldier's appearance was very normal. He couldn't remember what he looked like. He was the commander, but there were several thousand people in the Imperial Guards. Was he to know all of them? Really unable to remember about the person, Commander Sun gave up. It was just a coincidence, the heavens helping him. Otherwise, if Duan Wang had died due to an assassination when he was the commander of the Imperial Guards, He might not have been able to keep the hat on top of his head, but his head would have dropped along with the hat. In Cheng Wang Fu, He Ming finished listening to the servant report on the matter of a GE being attacked by assassins. He thought for a beat before ordering, "Prepare the gifts for Duan Wang." Ben Wang might be going to Fu Lan Manor in a few days to accompany Er Ge in his recovery. As expected, in the afternoon, the Fu Lang Manor sent someone to Cheng Wang Fu. They said that Fu Lang Manor was beautiful and clean and the Tai there were skilled at treating injuries. They hoped that His Highness Cheng Wang would stay for a few days at Fu Lang Manor to soak in the hot springs and let this Tai look at his wounds again. Chapter 60 Er Ge, are you showing off your love? The white jade hot spring, in Chu Qingju's eyes, was just a small swimming pool. She happily did a few strokes of butterfly, and then backstroke. She swam from one side to another before she stopped to lean forward on one side and looked at He Hung, who was sitting near the edge, drinking tea. It's such a pity that Wang Yi's wounds haven't healed yet. Otherwise, we could be soaking together. She saw the other's eyes glance in her direction. Her feet pushed off and she swam away. Seeing Chu Qingju treat the hot spring as her personal swimming pool, He Hung smiled helplessly. Even though the other's actions were a bit annoying, her posture was very beautiful. His gaze fell upon the body in the pool. She was wearing a red body-length dress embroidered with a scale pattern. It spread out in the water, making her look like a mermaid. There was a beautiful dash of red in the pool, and then she purposefully struck a seductive pose. When he saw Chu Qingju throw her head back, revealing the clean and white neck, He Hung gulped a large mouthful of tea to cool the heat inside. It wasn't good to soak for too long in the hot springs. Chu Qingju climbed on the jade stairs beside the hot spring to leave the pool. After using a large cotton cloth to towel herself down, she took off the now transparent scale dress right in front of He Hung. She tied a large loose robe around her body, walked towards He Hung and bent down to pick up his teacup. She smiled as she commented, "Wang Yi, drinking too much tea can cause your wound to scar." He Hung was too busy admiring the picture of the beauty in the bath, and had forgotten about his tea. He reached out with his right hand to pull the other into his embrace, the teacup falling to the floor with a tinkling sound. "Since I cannot drink tea, why don't I have a taste of a beauty instead?" Chu Qingju's finger gently swiped across the bandaged wound on He Hung's left arm. She gave a smile full of regret and uncertainty, but the Tai said Wang Yi has to rest. The Tai didn't say that Qingju had to rest. He Hung moved as he held the person closer. A certain part that was exceptionally alert coincidentally touched Chu Qingju's sensitive part. Why doesn't Qingju exercise some more? Chu Qingju twisted. Seeing the other inhale, she breathed softly and licked at his neck. Is Wang Yi asking Kia to help? As his right hand caressed that willowy waist, He Hung's voice trembled. Is Qingju willing to help? Her arms wrapping around He Hung's neck, the corner of Chu Qingju's mouth curled, looking unspeakably enticing. The tip of her tongue swiped across her lips and she asked in a light voice, "Wang Yi, why don't you take a guess?" Their gazes met. In the midst of the white steam obscuring the room, the two curled around each other, igniting the excitement and tension in the room. More than an hour later, Chu Qingju and He Hung came out together. Chu Qingju only had a red jade hairpin in her simple hairstyle and wore a wide-sleeved dress as red as the sunset. When contrasted against the black cotton robe of Wang Yi, it looked extremely picturesque. He Ming was escorted by the servants to his residence. He coincidentally saw Er Ge and a red-clad woman walking together. He paused momentarily before lowering his eyes as he quickly walked in front of the two. "Good morning, Er Ge, Sao." "Good morning, Sai Shu." Chu Qingju lowered her head slightly and took a small step back. "You finally came. Wei Xiong has been hoping for a long time that you would come." He Hung released Chu Qingju's hand. He said with a smile, "Go see your residents first. If there is anything lacking, just order them." "Thanks, Ge." He Ming cupped his hand over his other in a fist. He, along with his entourage, followed the manor servants to his residence. His rooms were not far from Yu Yun Tower. It was called Joyful Jade Pavilion. Located beside his rooms was a hot spring. This seemed to have been specially arranged for He Ming. He Ming looked at his surroundings. The furnishings were all very fine, Even the color of the bed covering were what he usually used. Sitting down at the carved pearwood table, the Yahuan came in with tea and refreshments, presenting them to He Ming. Just as he took a drink, He Ming saw Ming He coming in with a smile. He gave a respectful bow before he spoke. Your Highness Cheng Wang, our Wang Yi said that after you have rested, he invites you to join him for the evening meal at Jade Cloud Tower. If your Highness is not used to this room, Nukai will get the servants to change it immediately. This place is very good, nothing needs to be changed. Give my thanks to Ge. He Ming smiled, pushing his teacup to one side. It is me who is disturbing him. Gong Gong, please tell Ge that I will arrive on time. Your Highness Cheng Wang exaggerates. You and our Wang Yi are brothers. There isn't any disturbing here. Ming He bowed as he replied, Nukai will report back to Wang Yi now. Your Highness, please have a good rest. He gave another bow before shutting the door as he left. Once the door was closed, the rooms became much quieter. He Ming deduced that the servants were purposefully stepping lightly as they passed by his rooms, clearly being careful so that his rest was not disrupted. Ge's people are very proper. He Ming spread his arms, allowing his personal Taijian Sun Hai to undress him. After his jade coronet was taken down, he leaned back into the sofa. Coming here today means that I am standing with Ge. Sun Hai carefully placed the jade coronet into a box. Hearing Wang Yi say such a thing, he questioned in a small voice. Wang Yi, you came here to recover. Why I'm already in the middle of the situation, who can I avoid it? He Ming laughed carefree. In any case, it wouldn't be as bad now. More so with Ge. He may be usually warm and polite, but he certainly isn't a benevolent and soft-hearted person. Laro Da might be straightforward and generous on the surface, but in reality he was narrow-minded and remembered only offenses, not boons. To ally with such a person, the other wouldn't have gratitude for his allies unless every venture was successful. Laro San's personality is arrogant and brash. His heart only has power, not the people. To be close to such a person, even if he became the emperor, there wouldn't be any easy days. As He Ming spoke, his tone changed. But Ge, his personality isn't as generous as Laro Da's, but he doesn't look at everyone haughtily. His thoughts might be deep, but he isn't of fickle character. As long as nothing seriously wrong occurs, there will be at least some feeling. Originally, he had been hesitant, but when he saw Ge and Soro holding hands as they walked, he made his decision. As an emperor, he naturally couldn't be compassionate and lenient, but he would not be completely emotionless. Someone like Ge was perfect. Sun Hai didn't understand why Wang Yi suddenly made such a decision, but as a personal Taijian, aside from loyalty, he also had to know when to speak. So he only needed to follow Wang Yi's orders. Go deliver the gifts Ben Wang brought to Jade Cloud Tower. Say that this is the regard Ben Wang has as a DD. He Ming stood. Go, Ben Wang will rest. Yes, Sun Hai looked at the bed that had already been prepared and carefully retreated. Chu Qingju looked at the heap of gifts that Cheng Wang had delivered. He had included items that were suitable for women. It looked like he had even prepared gifts for her. She turned to look at He Hung, who was toying with a jade lion biting a ball. For some reason, she was reminded of the lion that had won the ball in the New Year's lion dance. Wang Yi likes this jade statue. Chu Qingju smiled as she asked, this lion is good-looking, so majestic. The multicolored pearl in the mouth was also carved well. Returning the jade statue to the box, he closed the lid. He Hung commented, it's very rare that Sai Di has such intentions. Chu Qingju smiled, nodding. Sai Shu is really too polite. He can come freely, but why send over so many gifts? Her eyes swept over the jade lion box. She thought calmly, the busy little student Ming wasn't as honest as he appeared. That made more sense. How could a naive child appear in the imperial family? If there ever was a naive child, they would have already been reincarnated into another family. You like it too? He Hung nodded at how Chu Qingju kept gazing at the box. He said, since you like it, then take it. It's just a small ornament. It would be its greatest fortune to make a beauty happy. I'm a woman, what do I want with these lions and tigers? Chu Qingju snorted, in the future, why don't Wang Yi find me some jade lotuses or hibiscuses? I find them more beautiful. She looked disdainfully at the box. It's only you rough men that like fierce beasts that chew raw meat. He Hung fell into speechlessness. It clearly represented grandeur and bravery, such a fierce and majestic lion. Why was it then, that in the words of his Wang Fei, it simply became a beast that only knew to eat raw meat? He immediately changed his point of view. It was just a beast. Where was there any other meaning? Even if it did have one, right now, it was just a jade lion. That night, He Hung put on a banquet to receive He Ming. Chu Qingju didn't attend. Even though the separation of the sexes in Da Long dynasty was similar to that of the North and South Song dynasties of the previous life, she was perceptive enough to not meddle in this matter. Chu Qingju's appetite wasn't affected at all as she ate the food that was made for her alone. She was even able to drink an extra half bowl of pearl pheasant soup. Wang Yi said he might drink some wine with His Highness Cheng Wang and that Wang Fei can retire early if tired. He had entered the bottom level of the tower and saw Wang Fei was washing her hands since she had finished eating. He added, Wang Yi also said that he wants to climb the Baiyun mountain with you tomorrow. I know. Get the servants to make some sobering soup. If the banquet is over, serve some of it to the two Wang Yi. Chu Qingju wiped her hands dry. She added, also, pass my words over, Wang Yi should drink less wine, too much wine isn't good for his wound. Yes, Nukai remembers. After He retreated, Chu Qingju's brow jumped. If he was playing the tactic of self-inflicted injury, then he had to play from beginning to end. The details determined the success. Whatever he shouldn't do, he really was not allowed to do them. After hearing his message, He Hung smiled helplessly. Turning to He Ming, he said, Look, this is the bothersome part of having a Wang Fei. She reminds you at every turn. He Ming saw that even though Ji was complaining, the smile on his face was growing brighter. He replied, Ji, don't get angry. Based on Didi's humble opinion, this is a Soro acting concerned for you. No one else would dare to restrict your pleasures like this. It can be seen that Soro has your body in mind. When he finished, he saw the smile on He Hung's face becoming even more visible. He raised a cup to He Ming. It looks like Sai Di will love his wife in the future. That's a good thing. He Ming followed in raising his cup, then drained his cup in one swallow. He Ming said to He, return to tell Wang Fei and say that I know and rest early. Yes, He once again left to ferry messages between Wang Yi and Wang Fei. He Ming seemed to feel that Ji was showing off. But given his understanding of Ji's character, he very quickly rejected the thought and admonished himself for even thinking of it. Sometimes, the truth just accidentally brushed past others. Chapter 61 Bamboo Stick. The assassination attempt against He Hung had caused both the court and the Hugong to descend into chaos, yet He Hung himself was at peace. He didn't have to wake up early to attend court, nor did he have to fence with those two bothersome brothers. He saw He Ming, clad in a brown robe, approaching him and a smile appeared on his face. Today's weather is pretty good. It's perfect for going outside. He Ming nodded in agreement. The day after Ji was attacked, there had been a rainstorm. Today's sun was exceptionally bright. Thinking back to last night, after he had finished eating, Ji had invited him for a walk to Baiyun Mountain. He didn't hesitate in accepting his invitation. But right now, he noticed that Ji was standing in the courtyard as if he was waiting for someone. I heard that there is a 5 estates monastery on top of Baiyun Mountain. Many people have visited the area. He Ming smiled. It's just that I've never been there. Us brothers are too busy with court matters. It's rare that we have free time like now. Let's go for a nice walk and take a good look around. He Hung's tone was relaxed, as though he had never been attacked at all. Whilst the brothers were talking, an unfamiliar Taijian scurried over to bow in front of them. Wang Fei said that it's possible to set off in less than 10 minutes. He Hung nodded. Order the servants to prepare the items needed for the outing. We will leave in 15 minutes. He Ming watched the relatively young Taijian walk away before hesitantly saying, Ji, I didn't know that Soro was going to come. This we're one family, there's no need to follow protocol for such a minor matter. He Hung smiled as he patted his shoulder. Saozi has been married to me for several months. She'd been running the household all this time and hadn't had a chance to walk around. Today's weather is so good, wouldn't it be a disappointment if she stayed in? Seeing that Ji really was treating him as one of his own people, Ming's heart warmed. He raised his hands together in a fist as he said, Ji is right, it was Didi who is too much of a zealot. Inside Jade Cloud Tower, Chu Qingju stepped into her embroidered flat shoes. She was in a good mood as she came out the door with her Yahuan. After seeing that both He brothers were waiting for her, she paused before walking rapidly to He Hung and bowed properly to He Ming. Good morning, Sai Shu. Good morning, Sao. He Ming hurriedly returned a bow. Chu Qingju retreated half a step, clearly avoiding half his bow. She turned to smile at He Hung. Has Wang Yi waited long? She wasn't wearing her usual floor-length dress. Instead she had on a short dress that was embroidered with peach blossoms. It was perfect, matching perfectly with the spring sun. Did you leave anything behind? If not, we should leave. He Hung touched the butterfly and flower gold buyao in Chu Qingju's hair. For some reason, even though he hadn't yet seen the scenery outside, he'd already felt that it was lovely. Chu Qingju shook her head, the buyao gently sliding against He Hung's palm. I didn't leave anything behind. Now is the best time to leave. If that's so, then let's go. He Hung grasped Chu Qingju's hand. He turned to He Ming, Sai Di, please. Ji and Soro first. He Ming took a step back, slightly lowering his head to indicate his respect for his elder brother and wife. He Hung smiled at him and walked with Chu Qingju in the front. He Ming walked 2 steps behind. His gaze fell on their backs and he felt admiration. Ji and Soro had such good feelings for each other. Thinking about his own marriage to the Xiajie from the Luo family, the rites ministry had already started preparing the wedding and He Ming felt expectation bloom in his heart. After his Wang Fei entered the Fu, would they be as affectionate as his brother and his wife? Sun Hai, following behind He Ming, was also deeply moved. They had said that the imperial family had no emotions, but that was only because they hadn't met the right person. Look at Duan Wang and Duan Wang Fei. This was a real perfect couple, a match made in the heavens. As the chief steward of Cheng Wang Fu, even though his ears and eyes might not be considered talented, he knew what he should know. He had heard that there had been a few beautiful women in Duan Wang Fu, but after Wang Fei entered the Fu, a beauty had been sent away, but Duan Wang wasn't dissatisfied with Duan Wang Fei. Even with the matter of Chang de Gong Fu, there hadn't been any whispers of dissent between the couple. Maybe it was because Duan Wang was infatuated, or perhaps Duan Wang Fei had great skill. But no matter the reason, out of the 3 highness who were married, only Duan Wang was the subject of the public's admiration. As it was quite a hike to reach the top, the servants had prepared the sedans in advance. If their masters became tired, their strength would be required. After coming out of the range of Fulang Mountain, they hadn't walked far before she saw Baiyun Mountain. Chu Qingju looked at the sign engraved with the 3 characters of Baiyun Mountain. She raised her head to gaze at the towering green mountain which appeared especially majestic under the sun. What is it? Are your legs soft? He Hung teased as he noticed her look of awe. Smiling, he suggested, if you don't want to walk, you can have them carry you. He pointed at the line of sedans behind them. Chu Qingju slightly raised a brow and reached out to pull his sleeve. I'm not afraid of going up. I'll just pull on you. He Hung laughed lightly. He whispered into her ear, if you can't walk up, I'll carry you. Chu Qingju gave him a smile, which instantly disappeared. She looked regretfully at his left arm. What a pity that Wang Yi is wounded. He Hung, He Ming felt that his name wasn't good, for sure. Otherwise, why else would his brother and Sorozi act as though he was as clear as a crystal, not existing at all? He shifted his gaze to look at the 5 Estates monastery that was located halfway up the mountain and wondered how much longer it would take to climb. The couple continued teasing each other before regaining their usual composure and continued their climbing. Both of them knew that the 5 Estates monastery was famous and it would have many visitors. If they met some family members of officials, it would be too embarrassing. The mountain road was made up of stairs carved directly from the rocks. There was an unspeakable feeling as they stepped on these stairs. As she listened to the birdsong, Chu Qingju turned to look back at her progress and felt joy at her accomplishment. Breathing hard, Chu Qingju used a handkerchief to wipe at the fine sweat on her face. She panted, "I didn't think I've ever climbed this many steps before." She saw He Hung's face wasn't red nor was he breathing hard. She felt that it wasn't fair. Didn't they say that these imperial sons had no strength, that they only knew how to eat, drink and play? Looking at this calm and composed state of He Hung, was her knowledge faulty? Wang Yi's endurance is very good. Chu Qingju reached out to pull on his sleeve so she could climb another step. How many more? We started learning the 6 arts when we turned 6 years old. When I was younger, I liked riding, shooting, and polo. You don't even need strength to climb such a small mountain like this. He Hung saw her state and wanted the servants to help her onto the sedan. But Chu Qingju refused. "I won't be defeated." Chu Qingju waved away the servants. She raised her head to look at the seemingly endless stairs. "Continue." He Hung smiled helplessly. He looked at her for a beat and extended his palm to her. Chu Qingju slightly lowered her face. She looked at the clean palm in front of her, pausing momentarily before putting her left hand onto his wide palm. Even the most difficult road would end. Chu Qingju finally stepped on the last rock stair. She looked at the black stone path that led to the monastery, breathing heavily. She wiped the sweat off her slightly rosy face and revealed a smile. "Finally here." He Hung looked at her, smiled and nodded. "Many wives of the officials and powerful men come to this place from Jing City. Wang Fei may be the only woman who has actually walked up the mountain. Today, when you go inside to request a stick, it will be the best one." Chu Qingju couldn't believe that He Hung would say such a thing. She stilled before replying. Wang Yi walked up as well. "So both of us will get a good stick." He Hung reached out to touch her forehead. He found that she hadn't over-sweated. Relieved, he said, "Husband and wife is one being. When you request a stick, it will represent the both of us." Chu Qingju thought to herself, "Who doesn't know that you feel that it is improper for males to do such things?" The smile on her face became even luminous. "Great. With our combined luck, it would be an extremely good stick." The three walked to the main gate of the Five Estates Monastery and found that the monastery wasn't very large in size. It looked very ancient and dignified. A black-bearded master sat near the door, the Buddhist robes on his body slight worn and clean. He didn't seem to react to their appearance. The monastery worshipped the Jade Pure One, the Grand Pure One and the Supreme One. Chu Qingju, the atheist, started to revere deities after her time travel. After she had entered the Hall of the Gods through the side door, she knelt down on the praying mat. She bowed, then took the jar of sticks and closed her eyes as she shook. A short while later, a stick dropped out. She scanned it. She found that if the characters were separated, she could recognize them, but she couldn't understand the meaning of the whole poem. She returned the jar to its original spot, picked up the stick and left through the same door to see the master. "Please, master, explain this stick to this one." Chu Qingju politely presented the stick with both hands. The black-bearded master looked at her hands before raising his head to gaze at her face. He stood to take the stick with both hands, a harmonious smile on his face as he requested, "This honored female, please sit. Wait for this poor Taoist to take a look." He Hung saw Chu Qingju sit down in front of the black-bearded Taoist and stood to walk up behind Chu Qingju, waiting to hear the Taoist's explanation. Who knew that the Taoist would take just one look at the stick before placing it to the side. He ran his fingers through his black beard. "The Endless One, recently Jing has encountered great change. Not many have come to the monastery to request sticks. The fact that the two honored ones have walked up at this time, it might be fate. This Taoist sees that both have brows that are full and light auras. Even if a stick hadn't been requested, you already have great karma. This Taoist has profound wisdom to know that we had walked from just a glance." Chu Qingju smiled, neglecting to mention their supposed great karma. "This Taoist Xian Ling has stayed at this monastery for more than half a year. In all of this honored one's life, only you two cannot be explained by this Taoist." The bearded Taoist stood up to bow to them and placed the stick in He Hung's hand. "This Taoist has failed the two honored one's hopes. I'm ashamed." He Hung took the stick and smiled warmly as he reassured, "Spirit Master Xian Ling is too serious. The mandate of heaven is all around the world. We shouldn't make things difficult for Spirit Master." He lowered his head to look at the stick. Written on top was, 9 mountains quiet green tears flower red, 3 gung fire 5 gung chicken. Feng, 3, flies elegantly, the 4 seas beg huang. A strange stick. The first part was not related to the second. The words did not match, not to mention the lack of any coupling. It was a mess. He handed the stick over to Chu Qingju. He didn't know why women liked believing in this kind of stuff. Chapter 62 Reality. The spirit master didn't notice he passing the stick over to Chu Qingju. He gave them another Taoist bow, 2 honored ones. No other guests are coming here today. This Taoist bids you farewell. He left the place, stroking his beard. Before Chu Qingju could react, Spirit Master Xian Ling had already walked into the forest. She could only see the back of his figure as he quickly disappeared from her sight. He really did look like a powerful master, leaving so gracefully and only showing the back of his figure. Chu Qingju lowered her head to look at the stick in her hand. She might not understand the meaning of what was written, but she could still detect what was wrong with the stick. Most sticks were part of a set amount, the writing of a particular style. The one she received had the wrong type of coupling, the topics were unrelated and the tone was wrong. Even the poem was constructed randomly with no rhyme or reason. Perhaps this stick had been a practice stick of one of the junior Taoists of the monastery? No wonder the Taoist looked profound but couldn't explain the stick. Did he also think the stick wasn't right? 9 mountains quiet and green tears flower red, 3 gung fire 5 gung chicken. Chu Qingju toyed with the stick as she recited the 2 unrelated lines. She raised her brow and stood up. Wang Yi, I don't think there is anything more to see here. Why don't we leave? He saw that she didn't seem to care about the stick since she'd handed it over to Mu Jin behind her. He smiled and agreed, let's leave then. The Taoist said that they were some honored persons and that the number of Jing guests had lessened after that incident in Jing City. He must have noticed their status from their high-quality clothing, and the assassination attempt had only occurred a few days earlier. As for that part about them climbing up the mountain, he turned to look at the rosy blush that still hadn't faded from Chu Qingju's face. It was a very visible fact. Ghosts and gods, it was just that one saw what one expected. What 9 mountains quiet and green tears flower red, 3 gung fire 5 gang. Hung's expression suddenly changed. He stopped dead in his tracks and turned to look at Mu Jin, who was supporting Chu Qingju. Let Ben Wang see the stick again. After seeing no objections coming from Wang Fei, Mu Jin carefully gave him the stick. She noticed that Wang Yi's expression was slightly strange. This stick has nonsense written on it. Don't waste any effort in keeping it. He threw the stick to Chen Changxin beside him, before turning to speak to Chu Qingju. The road down is more difficult, we'll use the sedans this time. Chu Qingju didn't look at his actions and only smiled and nodded in response. The couple walked ahead of He Ming, who was perplexed by his brother's actions. He said, a stick that has no rhyme or reason, it seems that your Aso's hand isn't very lucky. Chu Qingju smiled as she replied, I asked you to come along this time. You didn't join me because you said that I was requesting for the both of us. Now you disdain my hand for being unlucky. That's not fair. Fine, fine, good men don't fight with women. He smiled as he waved his hand, we should still descend. There's a small stream at the foot of Baiyun Mountain. We can have a picnic beside it. That's good. He Ming acted as though he didn't see the flirtations between the two, a sincere smile on his face. UDI had always wanted to have a meal in the midst of nature. As the three talked, they walked along the black stone path. Somehow, the topic switched to the matter of He Ming being attacked when he went to Jiangnan. The royal court might be fighting heavily, but this matter will eventually reach a conclusion. He understood his predicament, patting his shoulder as he comforted sympathetically. There is always difficult matters in the world. You just have to endure them. Ge is right. Even if Fu Huang is honored of the 9-5, he cannot do as he pleases. He Ming smiled. Don't worry Ge, UDI understands. He nodded. He looked at the 3-step carriages in front, saying, Sai Di first. You first. He Ming slightly bent his body, expressing the respect that he had as a Didi for his elder brother in every way. After the three got on, Chu Qingju looked at the scenery through the sheer cloth. She felt the carriage start to sway as it moved. He Ming was right. Even the emperor, as the honored of the 9-5, could not do as he pleased, let alone everyone else. Suddenly, she straightened, honored of the 9595 patting her face. Chu Qingju once again relaxed lazily onto the soft cushion. It didn't matter if she thought too much. All she did today was get a trash stick, nothing else happened. Every step taken going down the mountain had to be firm. The servants carrying them carefully and steadily stepped on each stone stair. When they had finally reached flat ground, they all simultaneously let out a breath. Flat road was much easier to travel on than going downhill, and much safer too. Just then, they saw several carriages heading towards them from the opposite direction. The carriages looked alike and had 2 armored guards standing by each carriage. Qian Changshin's eyes narrowed and he instantly understood. This was most likely the female candidates who were being sent to Jing City from the other parts of the country. His expression didn't change and continued to proceed forward, not letting the servants give way. The driver in the front didn't know who it was, but after seeing the many guards following behind the 3 sedans, he knew it was most likely a family of an official or nobility who'd came out to see the wilderness. He drove the wagon to one side and waited for them to pass by before moving on. The candidates in the wagons looked at the sedans traveling past them and started to talk amongst themselves. I wonder who is sitting in the sedans. Look how big the procession was. A candidate who looked 15 stated, "It looks so magnificent. With this many guards and servants, it can't be a normal person." A slightly fatter candidate glanced at her. "Maybe it's a Wang Yi or Jun Wang." "Dream on. Is it that easy to meet a Wang Yi or someone similar?" Another candidate joined in. "Maybe it's a Wang Fei or a Xiaojie." Instantly, the candidates in the carriage laughed. The guard driving the wagon heard the noise inside and his face became colder. Looking at the way they boasted, they didn't have the fate to become an honored person. He recalled the news he'd heard recently. There was a rumor going around that Jing City wasn't stable these days. Cheng Wang and Duan Wang were both recovering in the Jing suburbs. His expression changed. Could it have been Duan Wang or Cheng Wang who had passed by? Otherwise, who else would have such a big procession in this place right now? When the sedan stopped, the curtain in front of Chu Qingju was lifted. She took Mu Jin's hand to get out of the sedan. Looking at the green grass and the stream nearby, she couldn't help but sigh. This place does have good scenery. When she turned back, she saw the servants were already building a stove and lifting chairs. In a short while, everything that needed to be prepared was completed. Chu Qingju felt that the artists under her management who acted in historical works were weaklings. Just looking at the sheer abilities these servants had, those artists would fail in comparison. He Hung walked to her side, pointing at the stream as he spoke. "This stream is very wide, so it was named Qingxi River. On the other side lies one of our properties. It was bestowed by Fu Huang 2 years ago." The frustration of having too many houses and not enough time to live in them made Chu Qingju give a small smile, a piece of Fu Huang's paternal love. "It's just a pity that we don't go out very often. We can't even visit all the properties that Fu Huang has bestowed, such a regret. In the future, I will spend some time accompanying you out and about." He Hung saw the joy in her smile and his own smile became more visible. He pulled the other to sit down on the table constructed earlier by the servants before announcing, "I had the guards hunt down some game so that the chefs from the Fu can make some dishes for us to taste." He Ming soaked in the sunlight, his heart warming up. He pointed at the stream as he ordered, "Sun Hai, see if there's any fish there. If there is, bring me a fishing rod." Sun Hai hurriedly ran to look at the edge of the stream. He quickly ran back. He smiled as he answered, "Wang Yi, this one saw fish in the water, but could not see how large they were. Then Ben Wang is going fishing." He stood and raised his hands in a fist to He Hung. Ji, Didi is going to fish for a while." He Hung nodded, "Be careful, don't get your feet wet." Hearing this, He Ming smiled, "Don't worry, Didi knows." Chu Qingju watched as He Ming lifted up his robe. After tying the cloth at his waist, he ordered the servant to bring a bench, a rod and fish bait to the stream edge. She sighed. Many of the 17 or 18-year-old youths in her previous life were immature children. He Ming was already this steady. Now though, he was expressing some of the vitality that young people had. She didn't know if it came from the heart or if it was just an act. She glanced at He Hung sitting beside her. This person was just over 20. To have the mind and tactics he did, it could be inferred that the imperial house was a place that toughened people. The complexity of the imperial house already surpassed the entertainment circles of her previous life. In the entertainment circles, the most you lost was fame. In the imperial house, if you lost, your life, wife and children were also forfeited. Just thinking about it, it couldn't have been easy for He Hung, as a young man in his early 20s, to be the way he was. She felt, in a deep part of her heart, a small drop of maternal care form. But after she thought of the person's cunning, that tiny bit of maternal care instantly disappeared. She casually used a silver pick to spear a piece of pear and put it into her mouth. Tender, juicy, the taste was also good. She speared another piece to hold up in front of He Hung, indicating for him to have a taste. Tasting it straight from Chu Qingju's hand, He Hung nodded. He smiled. Not bad. Qian Changxin glanced at the pear that had been placed very close to Wang Fei. Didn't Wang Yi dislike pears? At Jin and Princess Royal's Fu, He Guinyan flipped through the invitations in her hand. She said with a calm expression, "Just say that Ben Gong is exhausted these days, and won't be receiving any guests." These people only wanted to get exclusive news about Duan Wang and Cheng Wang. Didn't they know that as a woman, how would she even know such things? But even if she did know, she wouldn't tell them anything. Thinking about the palace news, she hesitated and summoned one of her most intimate servants, Du Memar. Last time at the admiring picture banquet, Ben Gong heard Demei likes fruit. Ben Gong has lots of new fruit here. Get someone to send some over to Demei. Also, the medicine that Ben Gong had prepared for Di and Sai Di, send that over as well. Du Memar listened before asking, "Princess, since the court is in a mess because of the assassination attacks, why don't you wait a few days before sending the items over?" He Guinyan's face was solemn as she explained. The imperial guards had found out that while the handicraft of the arrow used to attack Duan Wang was normal, the wood used for the arrow shaft is one that could only be found in the mountain of one of Rui Wang's properties. This matter has already been transferred to the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Justice. Sooner or later, they will be reporting to Fu Huang. Du Memar's expression changed slightly. A long pause later, she finally hypothesized, "Emperor has always been partial to Rui Wang, then this the world is watching." He Guinyan gripped a card. Fu Huang might favor Rui Wang, but he cannot stop the mouths of the world. No matter what the result is, Rui Wang, unless Ben Gong's 3 brothers are all gone, he will have no fate with the throne. Newbie will go immediately. Du Memar understood and hurriedly left. Flipping the card in her hand, she saw what was written on top, Chang de Gong Fu Wei Shi. She gave a cold smile. Did that person think she would be honored by her presence because she was the Laro Tai Tai of Chang de Gong Fu? She thought too highly of herself. There were many people in Jing City who were older than her, but she didn't pay them any honors. Not to mention that this old lady was part of a Gong Fu that was definitely going to fall. I made a terrible translation here because the author grabbed bits and pieces and shoved it together. 9 Mountains Quiet and Green Tears Flower Red is from a poem by Li he called Xiong Fei. Xiong Fei is the daughter of Emperor Yao, and actually the younger of 2 very famous sisters of Chinese mythology, Yi Huang and Nv Ying, who both married the same Emperor Shun who succeeded their father. The poem refers to the death of Emperor Shun, after which the 2 sisters committed suicide in the river. 9 Mountains is Juyi Mountains, the burial place of Shun. Quiet and green is the color of bamboo, and the tears flower red are the bloody tears of Xiong Fei. 3 Gang Fire 5 Gang Chicken is a Tang dynasty poem called Encouraging Learning. It is about a scholar working hard into the night with the lantern fire and then sleeping until when the chicken rooster cries to wake up and start studying again. Feng flies elegantly. The 4 Seas Beg Huang is from the poem Feng Seeks Huang. It's a love poem about a man who saw a woman and is expressing his longing and love for her. He's the Feng seeking the Huang around the world. The basic meaning that Chu Qingju and He Hung saw here was the 9-5 of the emperor in the first phrase. And everything else is up for people to examine. The first phrase belongs more to He Hung and the second about Chu Qingju. Chapter 63 Trapping Ning Wang. By now, Rui Wang was the most infamous person in Jing City. First of all, he was suspected of attacking his Didi, and now he was suspected of doing the same to his Gij. Such ruthless conduct, disregarding all fraternal duty. Even though it had not been proven, in the eyes of everyone, Rui Wang had now charged with being unfraternal along with being arrogant and domineering. Qingde Emperor hadn't thought that the two matters would have become intimately connected to 3 of his sons. He looked at the arrow which had been presented to him by the commander of the Imperial Guards. A beat later, he sighed. Regardless of the truth, Yuana wasn't suited to become an emperor. Your Majesty, Shu Guifei Nyang requests a meeting. The chief Taijian entered the room and knelt in front of him. Qingde Emperor stood and walked to the window and saw the woman waiting outside. He closed his eyes as he refused. Tell Shu Guifei to return. Just say that Zhen is too busy and cannot see her right now. A flicker of surprise appeared in the chief Taijian's eyes before he instantly recovered. He bowed and retreated. It seemed that the emperor had lost hope in the Third Highness. Guifei Nyang, Emperor is concerned with state matters at the moment, so he cannot meet you. The chief steward walked in front of Shu Guifei, respectfully announcing, please leave. Emperor doesn't want to see Ben Gong. Shu Guifei looked at the wide-open door, anger rising up within her. She turned and left, clearly furious at the conduct of the emperor. Respectfully sending Shu Guifei Nyang, the chief Taijian serenely bent at the waist. He looked on as Shu Guifei hurriedly left his view before slowly straightening. A smile, just like any other smile he had given before, appeared on his face. Shu Guifei's personality hadn't changed after all these years. But what was she doing by having a tantrum at this time? Shu Guifei came out of the main gate of Tianqi Palace. Her face had darkened considerably as she entered the step carriage. Not even the bright sunlight could lighten up her mood. When Jing Guifei met Shu Guifei in the Imperial Gardens, she was holding 2 roses in full bloom. Seeing the ugly expression on the other's face, she smiled as she asked, My, what has made you so angry? Jie seems to be in a good mood. Su Guifei snorted. I see that His Highness Duan Wang's injuries weren't that serious. It was the heavens that protected him. Jing Guifei handed the flowers to the palace maid beside her. I just don't know how the victim feels right now. Shu Guifei smiled coldly. She had always looked down on Wei Yisha's act, using pretty words to make His Majesty happy. She indicated for the Taijian supporting the step carriage to continue since she had no desire of disembarking. Jing Guifei narrowed her eyes as she saw the procession of Shu Guifei leave in a huff. She smiled lazily. Ben Gong loves her temper. Otherwise, how else could she have climbed to such a high position? Just as everyone assumed that the matter was definitely related to Rui Wang, the Associate Justice Tian Da Ren gave a report at court which surprised everyone with its contents. Tian Da Ren reported that the Supreme Court had, just 3 months before Duan Wang was attacked by assassins, received a report from a steward of Rui Wang's property. He said that the mountain had lost a large number of trees. It wasn't very valuable, but to prevent others from having nefarious aims, the steward had immediately notified the Supreme Court. So what Tian Da Ren means to say is that given the report from San Di's Fu, this incident has nothing to do with San Di, He Chi said amusedly before asking, but didn't Da Ren think that this may have been purposefully done by San Di? What the truth of the case is, this official does not know. This official is only reporting what is known to the emperor. Tianjin Ku didn't care for Ning Wang's nitpicking. He gave a bow to Qingde Emperor before continuing, Emperor, this official has also found that 3 months ago, the Imperial Guards had run across some wagons transporting wood. When they asked, they were told that they were the servants of His Highness Ning Wang. One of them had even revealed His Highness Ning Wang's medal. Nonsense, Ben Wang had just been fixing up a property in the suburbs. Half a year ago, the residence was burned, everyone in Jing knows that. What does Tian Da Ren mean to say? He Chi hadn't thought that Tianjin Ku would divert the matter onto him, instantly yelling back. Ben Wang thinks that you have treacherous aims and is purposefully slandering Ben Wang in front of Fu Huang. Please quell your anger, Your Highness Ning Wang. This official has already said that he is only saying what he has found, and has not said this matter is connected with Your Highness. Tianjin Ku gave a bow with 2 hands pressed together. Perhaps it is only a coincidence. Qing the Emperor narrowed his eyes at his eldest son. He trusted Tian Jin-ku. This was a person that he had met before he had succeeded the throne. He impatiently interrupted before Qi could defend. No need for discussion. Let the Ministry of Works investigate. How much would you use to fix your estate so we can find out the truth? He turned to ask Tian Jin-ku, beloved official Tian, do you know how much wood was purchased by Ningguang? This official has already investigated. Emperor, please take a look. Tian Jin-ku bent his body as he presented the evidence with both hands. After the palace hall Taijian presented the account to the emperor, he silently retreated to one side. Fu Huang, you don't believe a Chen? Qi looked in disbelief at the man sitting at the top. He knelt with a loud bang. A Chen definitely wouldn't do anything unfraternal. Fu Huang, please investigate thoroughly. Hasn't Zhen sent someone to investigate? Get up. Qing the Emperor irritably waved his hand. Tomorrow, Zhen wants to know the results. End of court. Once the emperor left, the officials started to leave. Qi looked fiercely at Tian Jin-ku. The other's peaceful expression made him even angrier. Tian Da Ren is such a good dog, when you bite, you take half of a life. Tian Jin-ku raised his eyelids, and lifted his hands up as he drawled, Your Highness Ning Wang is making jokes. Instead of Wang Yi joking around with this official, shouldn't you check to see if there is anything wrong with the lumber? Such a good Tian Jin-ku. Qi's face was black as he swept away. Tian Jin-ku watched as Ning Wang savagely rushed out of the discussion hall. He calmly adjusted his own clothing and continued to walk at a sedate pace towards the entrance. In Fulang Manor, Chu Qingju sat in the bathtub. She looked at the man bathing beside her, one of his arms raised high. She used a cloth to wipe his chest, caressing the other's muscles. She nodded in satisfaction. Wang Yi's body isn't bad. How my body is, Qingju should know best. He Heng smiled as he rubbed Chu Qingju's hair. He abruptly asked, Has Qingju ever wanted something very much as a youngster? His gaze swept across the jade gourd that was hanging on her chest. His eyes passed her white and tempting chest and slowly moved away. Wanted very much. Chu Qingju didn't stop her hands and wiped down his stomach. She teased him a few times before smiling. When I was young, I wanted so many things. It was different each day. When I saw other people's beautiful clothes, beautiful hair ornaments, I felt that I really wanted them. Afterwards, when I grew up, I wanted a peaceful life, a person to accompany me through my days, to accept and love me. She then laughed out loud, in either joy or self-disdain. He Heng assumed that the other people she'd mentioned were Chu Yu-su and the Chu family. He smiled as he reassured her, in the future, you don't have to admire others. I will give you many good things and have others admire you instead. He reached out to touch the luminous jade gourd. I will accompany you and love you. Chu Qingju's hands stilled. She smiled at He Heng, something swirling in her eyes. I believe that right now, Wang Yi's words are sincere. In this world, many men were sincere when they were spoke. But the length of this sincerity could be 1 month, 1 year, even a lifetime. No one knew for sure. As a gentle and soft hand smoothed over the other's back, Chu Qingju laughed as she promised, if Wang Yi loves Kia for a lifetime, then naturally Kia won't leave. He Heng's heart stopped. For some reason, he felt a slightly numb yet piercing pain as a sweet yet sour feeling took over his heart. He reached out to grab her waist. The waist in his embrace was very soft, but it gave him the feeling of strength. In this instant, he suddenly understood that even if a more remarkable woman appeared in front of his eyes in the future, there wouldn't be anyone who could make him feel the way he did right now. The steam from the bathtub blurred the figures of the two, spreading out so that their eyes became hazy like the steam. It was beautiful and somewhat unreal, but it made one feel that it should be like this. At court on the second day, all the officials stood in fear as they listened to the people of the Ministry of Works reporting the strings of numbers. They focused their absolute attention to the result announced at the very end. This official and subordinates, after investigating all night, have found that the amount of lumber His Highness Ning Wang had brought and the amount he had actually used did not match up. The Minister of Works trembled as he finished reciting the numbers in his hands and submissively shrunk his head as he stood to one side. Qi hadn't expected that he would be implicated to this extent. He moved forward a step to plead, Fu Huang, Chen has nothing to do with this matter. Lumber would have been wasted when they were reconstructing the residence. These numbers might not all be correct. Fu Huang, please reinvestigate. If it has nothing to do with you, why did the fingernails of the assassins' corpses have pollen from the balsam and rose flowers in your estate? Qingde Emperor threw a secret report in front of his eldest son. He watched as the other knelt down with a face full of disbelief. He continued, voice full of hurt, and the shoes they were wearing and their clothing, they were the handiwork of the embroidery women on your estate. Did you assume that others couldn't find out because they were just minor details? If you didn't want others to know, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. These assassins, they wore the same clothes as the ones who tried to assassinate Cheng Wang. Even the blades and arrows were from the same craftsman. How do you explain all of this? Qingde Emperor ranted furiously before coughing harshly. As the eldest son, you tried to frame and kill your brothers. Do you still have Zhen, or your brothers in your heart? Fu Huang, Chen is innocent. He didn't understand how his assassins were now mixed up with the unknown assassins who attacked He Heng. He kowtowed furiously, Fu Huang, Chen didn't know anything about this matter. Fu Huang, please investigate. Zhen had asked you to investigate the case of the attacked envoys. The truth seemed to have been uncovered, but who knew that the true mastermind was you, an unfilial son? Qingde Emperor pointed at He Qi, not wanting to hear his explanation. Zhen will pretend to not have an animal like you as a child. Come, imprison him in the Bright Moon Tower within the Jing suburbs. He will not be released in this lifetime. When he finished speaking, his body swayed and he fainted against the arm of the dragon chair. Fu Huang. He Qi saw Qingde Emperor faint, his already bad expression becoming even more ugly. Before he could stand, the imperial guards held him and started to drag him out of the hall. He struggled to raise his head in the hands of the imperial guards. He could only see, in the pandemonium of the great hall, a crowd of officials escorting Fu Huang out. At that moment, he suddenly thought that if the evidence had pointed to He Yuan, would Fu Huang have made the same decision? He twisted his body and stopped fighting when he found that he couldn't break free. He allowed the imperial guards to drag him away in a wretched state. He raised his head to look at the clear sky that stretched for thousands of miles. How did he lose? Had he underestimated He Yuan's intelligence, or was it that He Yuan was too smart that he had bought his act as just an arrogant and brash imperial son? He lowered his head, the finely crafted white jade coronet in his hair dropping to the ground. Looking at the coronet on the black stone, he gave a low laugh. Term used by emperors to refer to officials, usually those he is close to. The translation is beloved official. Chapter 64 Disparity. Before placing a stone, one has to look at the front, back, left and right. You have to break the other person's path and also leave a retreat path for yourself. The worst tactic is to damage the enemy 1000 but lose 800 yourself. He Heng played with the stones in his hand. Seeing Chu Qingju hesitating on where to land, he pointed to a corner. This place will block my retreat and eat 2 of my stones. If I play and block your retreat, you could play here and don't have to worry. Chu Qingju looked at the black and white stones. She couldn't see any back paths or forward paths, so she messily put down a stone where He Heng indicated earlier. She smiled and commented, today's weather is so good. It's such a pleasure to soak in the sun whilst playing Weiqi. And the person sitting in front of her seemed to be in a good mood. I think you are just lazy. He Heng wanted to go easy on her, so he didn't bother blocking those visible holes. Before he continued speaking, he noticed Ming He guiding a black-robed Wang Changming over to his table in a rush. Apparently, some major event had occurred. Chu Qingju also saw He Heng's subordinate's arrival and prepared to stand and leave. Who knew He Heng would put down another stone on the board? That implied he wished for her to stay and continue playing. Greetings to Wang Yi, Wang Fei. Wang Changming bowed to the two and said with a lowered head, Wang Yi, His Highness Ning Wang is currently being imprisoned in Bright Moon Tower and the Emperor has fallen sick in anger. Ning Wang had overplayed his hand. Chu Qingju's hand that held her stone stilled, her face showing surprise. Why is Dab imprisoned? What crime did he commit? From the investigation conducted by the Supreme Court, the Ministry of Justice and the Imperial Guards, His Highness Ning Wang was implicated with the case of attempted assassination of the Imperial Envoy as well as the case of attempted assassination on Wang Yi. Wang Changming didn't expect Wang Fei to speak, but seeing that Wang Yi didn't seem to mind, he answered her truthfully, "The palace has already sent down the decree freeing His Highness Rui Wang from his house arrest." This one heard that Rui Wang has already entered the palace to give his thanks. Dage was just locked up and the sick Laro-san released. This old emperor was in too much of a rush. Wasn't the head of the Supreme Court her Jojo? Did this matter have something to do with him? She turned her head to give He Hung a look of "How is this possible? I don't believe it," followed by a doubtful expression. "Dab wouldn't do such a thing. Maybe there is a misunderstanding." The Associate Justice Tian Da Ren has already thoroughly investigated the matter. The proof is indisputable. Wang Changming hadn't lifted his head the entire time. This one's status is low and unclear about many matters. However, this one heard that this matter has already been settled and has no suspicious aspects. The 3 Da Ren who were responsible for this case have all confirmed that they have no doubts. Did no one ever suspect that this was He Lao-er's tactic of injuring himself to gain confidence? Chu Qingju peeked at He Hung before randomly putting down a stone and exclaiming, "We're all the same family. Why should it come to this?" He Hung pushed the stones in front of him, looking agitated. How could it be like this? Dage is honest and straightforward. Why did he try to harm Sai Di and I? Chu Qingju looked at the servants hovering nearby and worriedly grasped his hand. "Wang Yi, your wounds hasn't healed. Don't get angry. Fu Huang is ill, and he would be waiting for you to visit him." He Hung turned to stare raptly at Chu Qingju. He then stood and announced, "Wang Fei is right. You and I will return to the city and enter the palace right now." He turned to Ming He. "Ming He, invite Cheng Wang to enter the palace with me." "Yes." Ming He quickly left. Wang Changming saw this scene and stated, "Wang Yi, please take care of your body. This one bids farewell." He bent as he left. He hadn't even given a single glance at Chu Qingju. Chu Qingju watched this Wang Changming leave. This person had excellent self-control and took great care in his speech and mannerisms. When he was answering her questions, he always maintained the respect for He Hung. Even then, this person didn't put her on a lesser position. She turned her head to look at He Hung. It looked like the subordinates he supported were just like him. On the surface, none of them had flaws. In reality, only they knew what they really looked like inside. "What? Dage is locked up?" He Ming asked in surprise. After hearing the words of Ji Steigen, Fu Huang fainted from anger. "What is going on?" His face was suspicious, but he walked outside with the servant, expressing how much he completely trusted He Hung. Ming He slightly bent his body as he narrated the series of events in a small voice behind him. When the procession arrived at the main gate, they saw that the carriages had already been prepared. He Hung and Chu Qingju were waiting for them beside the carriages. "It's Didi's fault for making Ji and Sura wait." He Ming lengthened his stride and raised his hands in a fist to the couple. "Please, we just came out as well." He Hung's expression was grave. "You should know the cause now. We're going into the palace to see Fu Huang right now. Anything else will wait until after that." The procession quickly got on the carriage. At this time, they didn't care about being in recovery. He Hung sat back straight in the carriage, his face increasingly pale, yet his spine did not bend one bit. Chu Qingju saw his appearance was getting worse, and guessed that this was what he wanted Qing the Emperor to see. So she said, "Wang Yi, since Fu Huang has already woken up, it must not be very serious. You have to take care of your own body." "I know, but just thinking about Fu Huang lying ill on the bed, I feel so restless," He Hung sighing as he patted her hand. Husband and wife gazed at each other, both showing an expression of "I'm very worried, I'm very sad." This was most likely the supposed two hearts linked as one, right? Once the carriage had reached the main door of the Imperial Palace, it couldn't continue inward. The 3 came down the carriage to walk to Tianqi Palace and saw a matron kneeling in front of the main hall. Chu Qingju recognized that the woman was Ning Wang's birth mother, Wen Gui Pin. As she passed by Wen Gui Pin, she couldn't resist glancing at this woman. She saw that she only had a green jade hairpin in her hair and a bent neck. After waiting momentarily at the door, a Taijian ushered them in. Chu Qingju reached out to clasp He Heng's hand, and dropped half a step to walk at He Heng's right. Qingde Emperor was leaning on the dragon bed. Seeing the couple of He Heng come in with He Ming, a sliver of guilt and regret appeared on his face. Before they completed their greeting, he'd already bestowed their seats. Just now, when we heard Fu Huang had fainted, us two brothers rushed to the palace. When we got to the door, we finally remembered that we didn't bring along anything. Fu Huang, forgive us for our impulsiveness. He Heng stood and said with some embarrassment, and the game we'd originally planned to give to Fu Huang was also left behind. This is your filial love, Zhen wouldn't criticize you for it. Seeing that his son had become worried enough to forget protocol, Qingde Emperor examined his second son in a good mood. He found that his face looked pasty white. Furrowing his brow, he said, "Sit down, you haven't recovered and yet you rushed to the palace, how can the wounds bear it?" "Just a small wound, sorry to make Fu Huang worry." He Heng gave a carefree smile. Sai Di's wounds are much more serious than a Chen. Qingde Emperor glanced at He Ming sitting at the side. Laro Da, that animal. Zhen hadn't thought he would conduct himself as an animal. "Zhen has let you be wronged." He sighed, his spirits low. Is it because Zhen isn't a good Fu Huang that he would do such a thing? "This has nothing to do with Fu Huang." He Heng violently rose, his feet tripping. He was quickly held up by Chu Qingju. He said urgently, "Fu Huang is a humane ruler. Dage usually is honest. This matter sounds fishy. Zhen knows that you've always cared for your brothers, but this matter has been investigated thoroughly. Zhen doesn't want to believe that he sent people to assassinate the two of you either. And to purposefully frame Laro-san. This son has such malicious desires, he doesn't deserve to be Zhen's son." Qingde Emperor was so angry that he heavily punched the bed and instantly started coughing again. The palace maid on duty hurriedly came up to rub his back. Qingde Emperor made her retreat in irritation. He forced down a mouthful of water, suppressing the itch in his throat. "You don't have to beg for mercy for him. Zhen has already made the decision." Chu Qingju watched this scene of paternal and filial love. In her mind, she silently thought, "Emperor, don't worry, your son really didn't come to ask for mercy. Whatever way you wish to sentence Laro Da, he wouldn't object." Qingde Emperor looked at the Urxi who hadn't spoken at all but was attentive and protective of his second son. He beckoned with his hand for her to walk in front of him. "Zhen has picked a good Wang Fei for you, treat her well." A woman, no matter the time and place, should always remember to protect her husband. This woman certainly was a good one. Fu Huang, a Chen understands. He Heng gave a smile. He reached out to grasp the slightly wrinkled hand of Qingde Emperor, his eyes reddening. "You've become thinner recently." Such a child. Qingde Emperor looked at the red around his son's eyes. The heart that had been turned cold by Laro Da warmed again. He reached out to pat a shoulder. "You are still wounded, return early and get some rest. These next few days, rest well in the Wang Fu. After this period, continue to handle affairs for Zhen. Chen will definitely recover quickly," He Heng assured. "Fu Hong, please don't worry." Chu Qingju listened to the conversation. For some reason, she thought of Shu Guifei. Wasn't that the type Qingde Emperor liked, so did he use the same standard to judge his Urxifu? After thinking about it, she lost the joy from his compliment. Was it really okay to have a double standard like this? As she watched father and son earnestly say many more words before reluctantly parting, Chu Qingju inwardly thought, both father and son must be very satisfied with this warm act. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so immersed in their roles. He Ming was still in his invisible role. Until the three of them had left, He Ming only said some lines at the beginning and at the end. Chu Qingju saw his calm expression and knew that he was used to this situation. Coming out of the door, Chu Qingju saw when Gui Pin was still kneeling outside the door. She couldn't bear to look any longer. How many mothers would stand by and watch as her child bared hardship? Even the most careful and timid person like Wen Gui Pin will gather the courage to beg at Tianqi Palace. Wasn't all this just for her child? "Your Highness Duan Wang." Wen Gui Pin, whether it was because she had no other choice or her mind was unclear from kneeling so long, she grabbed a corner of He Heng's robe, begging, "Your Highness Duan Wang, say a few words for Ning Wang. Chia wouldn't try to assassinate you, help him." He Hung took a step back. Seeing that Wen Guipin had a solid grip, he replied, Wen Guipin Yang Yang, I have already asked for mercy for Dage. This matter, Fu Huang has made his decision. Try again, just ask again for Ning Wang. Wen Guipin wept, I'm begging you, say a few more good words for Ning Wang. She saw He Hung didn't make a noise in response and turned to beg Chu Qingju, please, I'm begging you. Chu Qingmu moved away her eyes, not wanting to look into Wen Guipin's teary eyes. She wasn't a soft-hearted person, but she couldn't look at such a scene. What is this? Who dares to make such a ruckus in front of Fu Huang's front door? Chu Qingju furrowed her brows. He Yuan wanted to invite death just after being freed. Chapter 65 Decision. He Yuan strode in front of the pleading Wen Guipin and smiled as he lowered his head to look at her. What is Wen Guipin doing? It's a major offense to cause a disturbance at Tianqi Palace. Wen Guipin used her sleeves to roughly wipe away the tears on her face. She gave a cold smile as she stood, raising her chin to look at this Wang Yi who had a face full of pride in front of her. If that was true, then it's unknown how many times Rui Wang would have been punished. Whether or not I should be punished, that is up to the emperor, not a Wang Yi like you. Wang Yi must have learned protocol as a child. Didn't anyone ever teach you how to interact with a Shu mother? He Yuan's face instantly darkened. An unfavored Guipin dared to rebuke him? He said in a low voice, Ben Wang's protocol doesn't need to be corrected by you. If Wen Guipin has the ability, you should go beg Fu Huang to free Dage. He turned to raise his hands in a fist to He Hung. So, greetings. Good day, Sandi. He Hung looked at the guards standing nearby, a polite smile on his face. If Sandi is requesting to see Fu Huang, it's better to let them report early. Fu Huang has just taken his medicine. I'm afraid he will be resting for a while. I didn't think that Ge and Sai Di would arrive here faster than me. He Yuan's words implied that He Hung had arrived early because he'd been notified in advance. We used a quick horse and whip to rush here right after we heard Fu Huang became ill. He Hung didn't seem to hear the implication, a hint of embarrassment on his face. It was lucky that Fu Huang is as long-lived as the sky and was not seriously ill. But I was being ridiculous. He Ming, who was standing near the couple, bowed to He Yuan without speaking and retreated to the far side of the room. He Yuan glanced at him, calmly commenting, it seems Sai Di's body is much better. Thanks for San Ji's concern. UDI has no major problems. He Ming switched topics as he continued, it was a pity that I couldn't help Fu Huang with this matter. I feel guilty. He Yuan narrowed his eyes at this nondescript DD. A while later, he gave an icy smile and didn't reply. Chu Qingju silently watched this great play of the imperial house. The hatred Wen Guipin had towards He Yuan, the scorn He Yuan visibly held towards He Ming and the barely discernible dissatisfaction He Hung held towards He Yuan. Everything was displayed before Chu Qingju's eyes. She felt that, in this world, the most complicated relationships to ever occur between husband and wife, father and son, brother and brother, were all formed in the imperial house. Ever since Laro Da framed him, he'd been restricted to his Fu and even Fu Huang seemed disappointed in him. Therefore, after being freed from house arrest, He Yuan would always think of those stifling days whenever he saw someone connected to He Qi. His personality had always been loud, and he was never willing to discomfort himself. He'd always said whatever he thought and did whatever he wanted. He gazed icily at Wen Guipin. Seeing her eyes were full of hatred, he sneered, Wen Guipin shouldn't use such eyes to look at Ben Wang. If it wasn't for Dage framing me, I wouldn't have been imprisoned in the Wang Fu. If you want to hate someone, hate Dage for having such malicious thoughts. Don't hate an innocent person like me. Your Highness Rui Wang is innocent. The gentleness and sincerity that usually appeared on Wen Guipin was now completely absent. She pointed at He Yuan and, with a piercing voice, accused him, you dare to say that you didn't control the salt governance, didn't put out high-interest loans, didn't buy and sell official posts. He Yuan looked disdainfully at her. A long beat later, he said, if there is no evidence, then it's slander. I don't know why, as an imperial consort, Wen Guipin is so concerned with the matters of the royal court. What is the meaning here? When Gui Pin stared hatefully at him, but couldn't say a word. Her shoulders shaking slightly, she slowly lowered her head. Half a beat later, she didn't look at anyone else as she held a palace maid's hand to stagger away. Chu Qingju saw He Yuan's attitude and remembered the case of Jiang Nan. Was that case going to be set aside? Did the old emperor's brain have a problem? Such a major matter of the people, how could it be treated like a joke? As the emperor, because he was partial to one son, he would not care for the death of his citizens. High-interest loans, the salt governance, buying and selling official appointments, which one of those wasn't a major matter? If he didn't know, at most it would be an oversight, but knowing and not stopping it, wasn't that telling the people that the emperor didn't care about this matter, that the criminals could do whatever they wanted? Thinking about it more, she felt disgust forming inside. This kind of person had become the emperor. It was a calamity for the people of the world. If the previous emperor had even one more son, then it was most likely that the seat wouldn't have fallen to this kind of person. Just then, a Taijian hurriedly walked over and said that the emperor was summoning Rui Wang for an audience. Chu Qingju watched the young Taijian bowing and scraping as he ushered He Yuan inside. She moved her gaze as she descended the white jade stairs with He Heng. When their carriage had traveled a certain distance towards the Fu, she looked over at He Heng and stated, "Wang Yi, it isn't easy being one of the common people." She reached up to pull the curtain aside, and looked at the common people in sackcloth moving aside for their carriage, their wooden faces filled with awe and caution. She wasn't a true lady of a noble family. She might like beautiful clothes, delicious food, but she wouldn't feel that it was her right to oppress others, and sacrifice the majority to satisfy her own desires. He Heng couldn't believe Chu Qingju would say such words to him. He silently looked at this woman. At this moment, she had no charm on her face, no smile, not even her gaze was on him. But he had never felt that she was more worthy of the people's respect as he did now. He followed her hand to look at the crowds in the street, his eyes gradually calming. A beat later, he dropped his face down as he stated, "The hardship of these people should be the reason why the top people have to be more diligent and fair in governance." Chu Qingju let go of the curtain, turning her head to look at He Heng. She smiled suddenly, as though she had just made a decision. She nodded, "Wang Yi is wise, I believe you." He Heng silently looked at her and reached out to grasp her hand. He gave a sigh, "You." Chu Qingju lowered her head to look at her hand being held in the other. This person in front of her eyes might not be a good man, but he would become a good emperor. Originally, she didn't care who would become emperor, but after today, she hoped that it would be this man. She wasn't a saint, but she was still a person. So she couldn't accept the conduct of He Yuan and Qingde emperor, couldn't agree with the way they took everything as their prerogative. So if He Heng wanted to become emperor, she wouldn't try to stop him. Cheng Wang Fu and Duan Wang Fu was separated by a street. When He Ming bid farewell to Ji and Suo, he felt that there was something different about the atmosphere between the two people. They were still intimate, but now there was something more that couldn't be quantified. After he'd returned to Cheng Wang Fu, a list was presented to him by the Ministry of Rites. It listed the bride price that the Ministry of Rites had given to Luo Shong Shu Fu. It represented all the items that the imperial house was willing to give on his behalf. If he didn't want to add anything personal, they would prepare the bride price according to this list. As he put the list to one side, He Ming recalled the way Ji and Suo interacted with each other. He summoned Sun Hai and added many more things. He might not be favored, but he was still a Wang Yi. He wasn't poor to the point where he couldn't give out good things himself. The next day, Cheng Wang Fu returned the list to the official of the Ministry of Rites and he became deeply moved after reading the additions. This Cheng Wang was very generous. Minster Luo was fortunate. A few days later, the rankings of the spring examinations were released. The ones who qualified were mostly from noble families. Some intelligent people discovered that none of the top scorers had been recommended by Ning Wang's side. There were also not that many from Rui Wang's side. The top ranks had mostly gone to unknown second sons or Shu sons from noble families. Ning Wang was now imprisoned, so it was natural that none of his people were ranked. But Rui Wang didn't have many either. Wasn't that interesting? Soon afterwards, People found out that Rui Wang had argued with his Shu Mu in front of Tianqi Palace a few days ago. Some conservative officials couldn't help but sigh inside. This Rui Wang was too reckless. Even if his Shu mother's position wasn't high, she was still Ning Wang's birth mother. Rui Wang's conduct didn't care for anyone. After the rankings were released, it was time for the court examination. He Heng was still recovering in the Fu. The Fu frequently received the emperor, empress, and Jing Guifei's gifts. Chu Qingju told the servants lock up all the gifts in the stores. She remembered the emperor hinting to He Heng when they'd recently visited him, wanting him to quickly recover so he can attend court. But seeing He Heng's leisurely state, it was clear that he wanted to drag out his recovery period until the examinations were over before returning to court. Wang Yi, how about taking a look at how I trimmed this pot of bonsai? Chu Qingju put down the scissors in her hand. Seeing He Heng walk over, she waved for him to come admire her new work. After glancing at the bonsai, He Heng couldn't find the appropriate words to describe it. The atmosphere created by the way a bonsai was trimmed was a learned art. His Wang Fei somehow managed to force the bonsai into the shape of a gold ingot. This shape is very special, He Heng smiled as he touched the middle of the ingot. He didn't feel irritation when he saw the table was covered in leaves and branches as he sat beside the desk. He stated, "Today, I accompanied Sai Di in sending the bride price over to Luo Shong Shu Fu. Luo Lao Tai Tai asked about you. Luo Lea Tai Tai has cared for me lots. It must be that she saw Wang Yi and was reminded of me." Chu Qingju smiled and twisted her body to finish washing her hands in the basin Jin Zhon had brought. As she wiped her hands, she remarked, "I have even prepared the additions to Luo Gunyang's dowry." He Heng wasn't interested in the affairs of women. Hearing this, he only smiled. To a man who implicitly trusted his woman, the Huyuan could be given over to her care. He didn't have to control it too much. It won't be long before Sai Di marries. He furrowed his brows as he wondered. This year, many candidates have entered the palace. I don't know what Fu Huang is planning. Chu Qingju stopped wiping her hands, handing the cloth to a Yahuan behind her. Her eyebrow slightly moved. Does Wang Yi mean that new people are entering the Fu? He Heng carefully looked at her expression. It seemed normal, but he felt that it was wrong for some reason. He hesitated before saying, "I'm not sure about this matter. But don't worry, I won't look at them. Who cares who you look at, there's going to be even more beauties arriving in the future." Chu Qingju stood, flinging a look at him. She rubbed her forehead as she announced Wang Yi, "Kia doesn't feel good, and will rest for a while." She turned and left with the support of Mu Jin. He Heng rubbed his nose as he smiled helplessly. He stood to follow her to her bedroom. Strangely enough, he felt relaxed and carefree after being glared at by Chu Qingju. Chapter 66 Intentions. Chu Qingju didn't go to sleep when she entered the inner room. Instead, she just picked up a book to read as she sat next to the window. When He Heng came in, she didn't pay any attention to him, flipping the pages of the book in her hand. Step by step, He Heng slowly made his way behind her. Looking at her book, he spoke, "This Qian San Wanderings isn't as novel as Nuo biography. You could change your reading choice." What know. The saying is the many graces of beautiful woman. Wang Yi, what does this phrase mean? Chu Qingju glanced at him, placing the book to one side. I suppose Wang Yi prefers works like Thousand Red Biography and Harmonious Spring Hall. Those two books were about men who had managed to receive the affections of several beautiful women. That's totally untrue. With a beautiful wife, I don't need those. He Heng smiled as he semi-crouched in front of her. His slightly slanted eyes seemed especially focused. Doesn't Qingju already know what I think? Chu Qingju looked at this man crouched in front of her, her expression gradually calming. She moved her gaze slightly. Doesn't Wang Yi know how hard it is to guess the hearts of others? In this world, there is no one who can completely know the heart of another person. He Heng smiled and moved to grab a round stool to sit on. He wrapped Chu Qingju's hand with his palm. I don't need a person to completely understand me. But I know you understand my intentions, understand what I want, and understand what kind of person I am. That's enough. Chu Qingju felt, for the very first time, that this man in front of her was a teensy tiny bit pleasing to look at. She stared into his eyes for a beat before saying, "Wang Yi, I am just a normal person. It's not important what others say, what is important is what they do." "I understand," He Heng stood, kissing the corner of her eye. "Those of the imperial house think more than others from birth, but other than that, they aren't that different from normal people." Chu Qingju looked deeply at him and smiled suddenly. She didn't say whether she believed him or not. Instead, she stood up to walk to the bed and took out a pouch to give to He Heng. She pointed at his waist. "The one I sewed before is old now. Change it for this one." He Heng smiled as he took the pouch. Carefully switching the pouches, he grasped the old pouch in his hand. He stood and said, "Later, I have to go to Sai Di's Fu. I'll try to come back early tonight." Chu Qingju nodded. Gazing as he hurriedly walked out of the inner room, the expression on her face slowly disappeared. She stood and walked to the window. She saw that as He Heng walked into the yard, he put the old pouch into his chest pocket. She furrowed her brow, her eyes murky. "Wang Fei, Wang Yi treats you so well. When he left just now, he specifically ordered Nubi to serve you well." Yin Liu walked in from the outer room. She saw Chu Qingju standing in front of the window and asked, "The kitchen steward has just delivered the list, do you want to order?" Chu Qingju turned to look at her. As she walked towards the bed, she took the menu from Yin Liu's hand and randomly picked a few dishes based on the pleasing nature of their names. "Just these, let them pick the other fruits and refreshments." "Yes." Yin Liu put the list away. Seeing Wang Fei's expression was a bit strange, she asked, "Wang Fei, what is it?" Chu Qingju waved her hand. "Nothing, just a surprising little discovery." Yin Liu didn't understand but couldn't ask further, submissively retreating. Chu Qingju sighed. The truth of the matter was that He Heng's acting was already the epitome of perfection. In Cheng Wang Fu, He Heng and He Ming faced each other. He Ming raised a wine cup. Didi toasts you." He Heng raised the cup, tilting his head back to drink to the bottom. After putting down the wine cup, he asked, "I heard you sent away the 2 Tongfang on the Fu?" Hearing this, He Ming smiled. Even knows. 2 days ago, he had sent away the Tongfang in the Fu. The outside was saying that even before he married his Wang Fei, he was already afraid of his wife. He hadn't thought that this matter would pass into the ears of "I just wanted to live a calm life with a Wang Fei, treating her sincerely. By keeping those Tongfang, except making Wang Fei uncomfortable, what other use is there?" Sai Di is attentive. He thought back to the wedding night when Chu Qingju had married him. At that time, he felt the Chu family was too bothersome, and that Chu Qingju was too weak and cowardly. His heart hadn't felt at ease with her. The two had barely managed to live through the 3 days after the wedding. After she had returned to her paternal home, they hadn't been together. Even though he had specially ordered the servants not to slight her, he also hadn't had that much affection for her. In his first impression, Chu Qingju, if her head wasn't down, would have a wooden face and she didn't talk. She wouldn't say an extra word, wouldn't wear an extra hair ornament. At the time, he sympathized with her for being beaten into that state by Chang de Gongfu and felt that the days the two spent together were dull. He didn't know exactly when Chu Qingju became colorful and lively in his eyes. He gradually didn't like going to the side rooms. Now that he'd heard He Ming's words, he couldn't help but nod. If the two have good days, then these Ce Fei and concubines are just gilding the lily. Having or not doesn't make that much of a difference. I knew would definitely understand. He Ming smiled. "It was because I saw your love for Soa that Didi made the decision to take this step." He Heng slightly stilled. Swirling the wine cup, he smiled and advised, "One's Wang Fei, one naturally should love." He raised the wine up. "Come, drink a cup." The slightly cold wine as it flowed into his stomach became a scorching hotness. The night was as cold as water. He Heng quietly made his way to Zhengyuan. He waved away the greeting bow of the Yahuan standing guard and headed straight into the inner room. He saw Chu Qingju was wrapped up in her blankets, sleeping peacefully. After some thinking, he went out of the inner room, washed his hands and face before soaking his feet outside, and silently walked back in to undress before lying on the bed. Chu Qingju, muddled, felt someone lying next to her and twisted her body. Her eyes didn't even open. Wang Yi has just returned now? He Hung saw her dazed state and didn't speak. Reaching out to pat her back, sleep. As expected, the person beside him fell asleep again within a minute. Chen Changxin and the others had retreated after serving Wang Yi. He walked with Ming He as they left Zhengyuan before commenting in a small voice, "It's so late yet Wang Yi is still thinking of Wang Fei." It can be seen just how much importance he places on Wang Fei. Ming He knew the hidden meaning in his words. He quietly replied, "In the Fu now, the other Shi basically can't even enter Wang Yi's eyes. Us brothers only have to serve Wang Yi and Wang Fei well. Who knows what the future is like, walk a step and look a step. Regardless, we serve Wang Yi." Chen Changxin put his hands behind his back. "We will respect whoever Wang Yi wants us to respect. We aren't in control of anything else." Ming He smiled. "Gij is right. What special occasion is it today, that it's so lively?" Chu Qingju found that the streets were very busy, many people standing in the tea and restaurant towers. She was on her way home after visiting Jin and Princess, who knew that she would encounter such a situation, so she indicated for the sedan carriers to stop moving. "Wang Fei, today is the day for the top-ranked advanced scholars to ride and parade on the street," Huang Yang answered from outside the sedan. "Right now, they are walking towards here so it's busier." Chu Qingju instantly understood. The top thesis author, the eyes positioned beside, and the flower snatcher, 3, were parading on the street. The culture of Da Long dynasty was relatively liberal, so there were many young women throwing handkerchiefs, pouches and flowers among other things towards the 3 males. Chu Qingju couldn't see the people, but could see the objects flying in the air. This road headed straight towards the imperial palace. After these 3 finished parading on the streets, they would have to participate in the Cheong Lin banquet in the palace. He Hung would be appearing at the Jasper Forest banquet, 4, as well. After 15 minutes, the crowds gradually thinned and Chu Qingju's sedan continued forward. Sitting in the sedan, she heard a passerby remarking about how the flower snatcher was so handsome and how scholarly the top thesis holder was. She couldn't help but smile. It was lucky this era wasn't ridiculous to the point where women couldn't leave the house. Otherwise, it would have been terrible. The culture of Da Long dynasty was similar to the Tang and Song dynasties of history. There were even some similarities in cultural habits. But the structure of government was a mishmash of different dynasties. It was slightly complicated, but it meant that she wasn't exactly in the dark. Chu Qingju's knowledge gave her the motivation to keep on living. The people on the side of the street found an 8-person sedan with Qingluan ornaments, and pearl-encrusted dark yellow cloth and red heading their way. They all simultaneously moved out of the way. Other than the imperial house, who else dared to sit in such a sedan? "Mistress, there is an honored person passing by, we have to move out of the way." Chu Yusu heard the words as she sat in the sedan. She asked, "Which Fu?" As she spoke, she raised the curtain to look outside and saw an 8-person large sedan heading her way. She frowned. "Quick, move back." Feeling the sedan she was sitting on sway as it retreated a length, Chu Yusu's heart was bitter. Unless she could sit on the position of Empress or Dowager Empress in this lifetime, she would never be able to use red cloth. After the procession of the 8-person sedan passed them by a certain distance, Chu Yusu's sedan was raised again. The Taijian guarding the sedan outside said, "Mistress, this one saw that the person sitting in that sedan was most likely Duan Wang Fei." "Duan Wang Fei?" Chu Yusu stilled. "Wasn't that Chu Qingju?" Thinking about the other's honors and her present situation, she gave a cold smile. "All right, I know." The Taijian who spoke heard the tone wasn't right and jerked his mouth to one side as he lowered his head. At Jasper Forest banquet, the advanced scholars that qualified were all in a good mood. All those years of hard studying, wasn't it just for this day? Qingde Emperor only sat a while before leaving. The rest were being handled by the Ministry of Rites. Some advanced scholars were composing poems or getting to know each other, making the Jasper Forest banquet very busy. But there were many who were steady, who didn't not casually speak nor show off. They didn't excessively drink wine to prevent loss of composure after getting drunk. He Hung sat on the first spot at the left side. Looking at the variety of people under him, there were so many students, but the ones who would be used would only be a select few. That was the cruelty of politics. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.